Hey, buddies, thank you so much for clicking on this episode and giving it a chance. If you are new here, I especially thank you for giving this a chance for your viewing pleasure or listening pleasure. So today's episode, I speak with Paul Caldwell. My first time running into him was at the gym at Vaza Fitness or Vasa Fitness, whatever your prudness is. And he really just drew my eye with his physique and the way he looked and the way he carried himself. And I always wanted to interest and ask him questions. So I started doing so. And then the more and more I find out about him, I said, this is an interesting guy. I'd love to get to know more about him because I'm sure that there is. And there definitely is. So in this episode, you're going to find out a lot of stuff about him that even I didn't even know prior to this episode. So I really enjoyed talking with him and getting to know him more. And I hope to have him on again for a second episode. If you are new here, welcome once again. I do appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So if you do enjoy this episode and you want to listen to more stuff like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well, and leave a comment down at the bottom of whatever you liked most. So without further ado, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule.
Oh, yeah.
Paul.
So busy all the time.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate it. But so I'm glad that we're finally able to do this. So go ahead and explain to the listeners here on More with Stumpo of who you are.
I'm Paul Caldwell. I born and raised here in Indiana, small town, Morristown, Indiana, 1,000 people. Grew up on a farm. Do a lot of fitness-related things at this point, which is fun because it's not really my field, but that's where life has led me now and has led me here to this podcast at this point.
Oh, yeah. This is the highlight of your life, isn't it?
It is,
No,
yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, this is a great experience. I'm really excited to be here. Like I said, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Well, good. Well, I'll go ahead and explain, obviously everyone else who already knows who I am. I'm Matt Stumpo. It's my little podcast, More with Stumpo. And thank you guys so much for tuning in on it too. But I met Paul at the gym. I met you there. You were a trainer there still.
More or less, I was a membership specialist, what they call it. So a lot of front desk stuff, but things that you put on your resume to make it look better, but it's not that fancy.
It's going to exactly make it look a lot better. So, that's how I met you, man. And you have a distinct frame to you that I find pretty astonishing. And I always love talking to people that have the drive at the gym and the determination and discipline to continue to keep going. And then the more I've learned about you, the more interesting I've found you to be.
Oh.
So what I found super interesting about you was that you talked about being a vegetarian.
Yeah.
Which I've honestly, dude, I've never met a vegetarian that looked healthy. that's the weirdest thing. So that really took me off guard when you said that.
Yeah. So there's not, especially in, whether it be bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, whatever kind of discipline you are at the gym, or if it's just functional fitness, there's not really a lot of people that are vegetarian, because forever, you're kind of like thinking, like if I'm going to put on muscle, I need to have protein. And it's still true that like the most like protein dense sources do come from like meat, right? And I'm not going to feud that at all. But there is truth that, like I said, if you don't want to eat meat for whatever reason, you don't, like I said, like I said, preference or just how you feel. Sometimes it's a religious thing. Some religions don't eat meat. And so it really depends on you. But if you, like I said, don't want to eat meat, there's ways to work around that, right? It takes a little bit more effort, especially at the beginning, but then after you've done it for so long, you just, like it comes second nature, and it's not that hard anymore. So
what was your reasoning to not eat meat?
So while I do fitness things, all right, my background and I have 2 bachelor degrees and I have a master's degree. So my bachelor's degrees are in international studies with a thematic concentration on diplomacy, security, and governance. It's a mouthful. Both these I got from IU as well, Indiana University. The second one just being in French language studies. And then I went on to study at the International University in Geneva, and I got a master's in international relations and diplomacy. Just for a quick background, so one of my classes was actually environmental policy, right? Where I had this professor who's actually from the Netherlands, came in, and he works with a lot of companies and stuff about like reducing emissions and like CO2 levels and stuff. And it really came down to like, when we were looking at the data about meat, it wasn't so much like, I've never been like a moralist kind of vegetarian. Like I grew up hunting, and like, white-tailed deer, and like I love summer sausage and everything like that. But also grew up on a farm kind of mentality where it was, like whatever you kill, like you use, right?
Yes.
And, like you I said, you don't ever disrespect anything in the process. But that's the background. But back to what I was talking about is it was just that meat in itself, especially red meat, was inefficient. It was just kind of came down to this efficiency thing, right? Like what the resources that go in to produce red meat with, like, if you break it down to just like clearing land so that for cattle, how much water goes into the process of like creating just 1 pound of meat, that there's a lot of energy lost in all of that. And I was like, I never really thought about it like that, right? That there's like it's inefficient in a way to where like a lot of proteins that come from more plant-based or like dairy or egg sources are more efficient. The efficiency is not like perfect, right? Because there's always going to be energy lost in any process, but they're more efficient. I was like, so I played with the idea. I was living in Geneva, Switzerland also at the time, which is really expensive. Like it's about, I don't recommend anybody, like I said, to go on a student visa there because you can't work for one, so you can't make money, and it's really expensive. So like everything that I had like saved up, like kind of went out the window. But what had happened was over the time that I was there, I had just started eating meat less because it was so expensive. I remember like 2 chicken breasts was like $9-10, and being like a 220 pound, male, like I need a lot of protein to even just like to maintain, especially with the activity level I was doing. So I was looking for alternatives that were cheaper in a way too, just so I wasn't bleeding money so fast. And so that, and then just learning about the general inefficiencies, I was like, and then I remember I also watched the Game Changers. It was like a documentary that they put on Netflix where they kind of picked and chose a lot of the data points. And so it didn't really have a big impact on my decision because I was like, they're picking and choosing their arguments a little bit too much for plant-based.
Which happens quite often. Yeah,
yeah, their methodology I don't think was very sound. So like I said, I did watch it, but that wasn't really a big reason. I was just like, I mean, you could do it, I guess. But like I said, this is kind of a little bit far-fetched in some ways. So I just like the next day I was talking to my girlfriend about it. I was like, I'm just going to try it, like I'm going to like try it. It was never that I'm going to be vegetarian either. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
It was more about like, I'm going to reduce my consumption of meat. And it has always been that, actually. It just so happens that I haven't ate meat for the last 3 years. I was always like, if I crave meat and I want to eat it, I will. Right. I just want to reduce my consumption. And I would say like for the first couple months, I was like, I don't know, maybe it'd be nice. Like if I was in the U.S., I really craved a spicy chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A, right?
Okay, yeah, I get that one.
But I didn't have access to one, so it didn't matter, Or wings. I still wanted wings, but wings isn't really the same kind of concept in Europe. So I was like, the things I actually am craving right now, I don't even have access to, and then the rest of the meat, I don't really want to pay money for it and buy it. So it was like, months went by, didn't have meat, and it just kept going. I just wasn't eating meat. And then some truth, like at first too, even when I came back to the US, it was like all during COVID and everything back in 2020. I came back and I could still eat things that my mom would cook. She would cook for me sometimes, and she would cook, like a meatloaf or something, and have like always like carrots and potatoes on the side, right? And even at that point, I could eat those and nothing would be wrong. But it is true that the longer you go from eating meat, the more you kind of like get nauseated by that, even. Yeah. To where like if I eat something like that or something that I'll still have like I had a French onion soup not too long ago, and it was made with beef broth, and I was like, I just really want, your French onion soup. And a lot of vegetarians will like probably say like, well, you're not a vegetarian because you had that, and that's fine, because like. If that's like, I say if I don't belong because of that, that's fine. But like, I was like, I want this and it's broth. That's my concept of, being quote unquote a vegetarian isn't based upon that. It's always been about reducing my consumption. And so I had it. Right. And, because there's all these levels to vegetarianism. There's levels to veganism, some vegans, because you're not having any kind of, you're not having any animal like meats, but you're also not having any animal byproducts. But some vegans might be okay with having honey. Some vegans are not okay with having honey. So that's not veganism because bees create honey, right? So there's always circles within circles within circles. So I'm probably not a great vegetarian by some people's standards, because if I have something with broth in it, it's, you know, so it's made kind of with some animal product in it. But that's not what it is about for me. It's always been about, reducing the consumption of meat and its products to help kind of lower the and it's almost like when you think about it on a large scale, it's kind of pissing into the wind, because it's probably not making that big of a difference, but it's just something that I wanted to try and I just kind of stuck with. And in a way, I also kind of feel better. Not like I said, it's not a morally better thing.
You think the placebo effect of being able to make the change from having the idea of you're lowering your consumption, which in the long run, let's say you would eat possibly about, let's say how many pounds of meat do you think a person eats a year? I mean, I know I eat it feels like 2 or 3 pounds a day.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's say a couple 100 pounds, let's say 400 or 500 pounds a year. So over a long period of time, you're losing out on tens of thousands of pounds, which is quite a few cattle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I see what you're saying. And I actually somewhat honor what you're talking about. Like, I do agree with actually some of the things that you're talking about. Like, I don't eat I don't eat certain brands because I know how they treat the animal.
And that was going to be my next point.
That I have, is, and I agree with you, and I agree with a lot of people who are vegans and vegetarians, is how they treat the animals. There's a lady, I can't remember her name. I'll find out what her name is while you're talking. But she's this woman who I believe, got Asperger's, and she knew how she was raised on a cattle farm, and the way the cattle that she worked at another company were getting treated was horrible. And the cows were stressed, and they were scared, and then they would get killed. And it does a lot to the meat. It actually taints the meat.
Yeah.
So she created a way of how to kill them humanely while they're stress-free, relaxed.
Yeah.
And then they're humanely killed for consumption for everybody else, which I agree with that. Like, if they're 100%. Mistreated and all that stuff, that makes me sick. And I won't eat Tyson meats. I will not eat Tyson meats. I typically try to stay like closer towards like local farms around here. It's a lot more expensive. Yeah. But I do know that they're treated a lot better. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt.
No. This is your podcast, sir. Like I said, I'm just a guest here. Yeah, exactly. No, and that's, like I said, that's a whole nother point too. Like, you know, like all your listeners, like, buy local. Like, you know, if you're gonna buy anything like meat wise, like, support your local farms, support your, like I said, your local community. Buy local, because there's, like I said, there's some cattle farmer that's going to be, especially here in rural Indiana. Well, I guess we're not in rural Indiana here, but I'm from
You're from rural Indiana.
I'm from rural Indiana.
I'll pretend like I am. I live here in Whiteland.
Yeah. I said. Yeah. So buy local, like, support local families, and buy that. If you're gonna, like, buy your meat, do that. And plus, you'll get, like, chances are, like, it's better to just go, like, even with your family, like, you know, your extended family. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
You look so much better right there. But still talking to it. I just wanted to see your face.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I don't know if they want to see that, though, but we'll see.
No, but you got to shave that little beard you got going. Dude, I got the same thing going, too. I mean, you can barely see mine. Yours is better trimmed right now. I can't. Does it grow in red?
It does. Like, the longer it grows, the redder it grows, which is something else we could talk about that's frustrating to my life, but we'll get there. Yeah. But go get, like I said, talk to your extended family. Like, go get, you know, go in on half a cow or something, and, like, split it up and put it in your freezer. It will last for a long time, and it's like better.
You'll use the cow,
and you'll use it, and it'll be better quality. It'll taste better, you know. And this is coming from the vegetarian guy, like. Do that, like I said, you'll be a lot happier with the process, and, like, you'll give back to your community, because you're supporting your local, like I said, farmers, rather than, you know, going to some kind of large conglomerate that could care less about you. Couldn't care less. Sorry.
Correct. And that treat their animals like shit.
Yeah, don't treat their animals like shit, because that's another thing, is, like, it's the immoral kind of, like, think about, you know, like, okay, a chicken doesn't have a lot going up upstairs, right? No. But that doesn't matter. Like, it's not like from a moral standpoint. This is where I do get kind of, like, moralistic about it, is that to think of, you know, living and dying in a cage, like, if anything that's alive, you know, like, it's sad, right? You know, like, and that's why it was nice getting to grow up on a farm. Like, we raised chickens. We raise
legit free range chickens.
Yeah.
Not like free range is in like they have a certain circumference of area they can walk in.
No,
like
exactly. Because that's the thing
that's
is like
that's the way they trick you.
Look at the asterisk and see what free range means on the product you're buying, because it's not always the same across the board. I mean, it is this like all of the definitions will be the same, but you'll be surprised sometimes that what you think is actually free range is very limited in itself, which still free range by its definition of whatever the actual nomenclature and the definition that they give is probably going to be better than not being free range. But how much better, you could ask yourself as well. But no, having been able to raise, like I said, chickens, pheasants, goats for a little bit. I said, and my family is very much in I'm beef cattle industry. I'm not lobbying for them here. Like I said, we're not really affiliated anymore. But you know, like you feel much more in touch, and that's something that I feel like a lot of people that are meat eaters need to like experience in their lifetime at some point. I've killed chickens with my hands, right? You know, and like so I was a part of the process of like, you know, like I took that thing's life. And the least that I could have done was to make sure to eat it, because like there's so much food waste too. We could get into that. Is like it's something that makes me upset too, because it's like, you know, that animal like died, at least eat it, right? Or people will be like, oh, you know, like they get on their high horse about like they'll still buy meat at the supermarket, but they get mad about people that are hunters or something. I'm like, if anything, it's
the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's like the hunter's more in touch with like the price that's paid by the animal in order like to eat it, versus you that like says feel like you're clean and sterile from the whole rest of the process,
because your hands aren't bloody doing the work.
But you're still consuming that animal. You know, it's just like, don't get on the high horse about people that hunt if you're going to go buy the stuff at the supermarket. Anyway, when the hunter is probably being more respectful in the way to the animal, because they're probably going to be making the most use of it.
Correct.
Not all hunters are the same either, but
most hunters that I've talked. By the way, that lady's name with Asperger's, it was Temple Grandin, was the lady's name. So like, if anyone's interested in that, I would definitely look her up. Let me fix that. Good Lord, that's a little bit better. I would definitely look her up. Her story's interesting. There's a movie about her. But the hunters that I've met are like conservationists. Like they love nature. Now they may go about it a different way. They might be a little bit more passionate the way they say things, and more brash when they say it. But when you sit down and talk with somebody who's a hunter who truly cares about it, they truly care about that animal. Like anything that's worse than not getting an animal, when not killing one, is grazing one or injuring one, and you knowing that he's still alive, or that he's still alive out there, that animal's still alive and suffering right now. Like that's, from the hunters I've listened to, like that's one of the worst nightmares that they can have, is because now that animal's suffering. Yeah. And they want to make it a quick death, and they want to
as painless as possible,
they
right?
want it to be as painless as possible.
And I know like a lot of people will be like, oh, you're still shooting it, but it's just like there is a lot of difference between like I said, when you're raised to, like I said, like to hunt or whatever, and you do it, and like I said, all of my deer hunters out there could probably agree with me. Like I said, you're always shooting for right back here, right? Because it should have the lungs and the heart all in line. So if you shoot right behind that first leg, and you, like I said, you get a clean shot, they should die pretty much instantly. You know, and then rather than like if you gut shot them or something like that, then it's gonna be a slow death.
Very slow. And you gotta go hunt them. You gotta go chase them down, and that means they might get tore apart. And also, what people don't remember too is you watch like any type of like animal documentary. Animals tear each other apart while they're alive. Like predators will eat you alive. Bears, lions, like all those types of animals will kill. Not just the most healthiest animal. They won't kill the healthiest. They always kill the youngest, the smallest, or the sickest. Yeah. Or the oldest.
Yeah.
And
it's vulnerable.
The most vulnerable, and it's not an easy death for them.
No.
Like you were probably saving them from because every animal dies.
Yeah.
Every animal out there will die. Most likely it'll die from old age, or it's die from sickness, or it's going to get murdered by another animal in a slow death,
or potentially starving.
Or starving, or by a hunter who wants to make it a quick, painless death. Yeah.
Because there was always the conservationist argument of like overpopulation as well. So
and you do have like some species that overpopulate, and like you just talked about, overpopulate, and then they damage either farms around the area, which are local farms around the area. They can damage them. You look at the pigs out in Texas, like they have completely overrun Texas, and they have those. You could pay, I think it's like $5,000 or $10,000 to do a helicopter ride and shoot pigs down or wild boar out there, because they'll kill small animals like dogs. They'll kill like they've been known to attack people and kids and stuff like that, and they get into neighborhoods and they terrorize everything. They cause disease, and there's just some things that are just bad for the environment.
I think another good example is the Burmese python in Florida. I believe it's a Burmese python. Like, so somebody can correct me on that if I'm. But I believe it is a Burmese python, like where it's not a non-native animal in Florida, and it's got really no natural. What's the word I'm looking for? Like I said, nothing is like
the Burmese python. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, Burmese python. It's got no natural predators, I suppose I would say.
So it's just flourishing down
flourishing there. Because there's nothing that's really, like I said, obviously you got things that could kill it, but nothing that is naturally pitted against it for thousands of years, and so it's overpopulating, and it's spreading. It's an invasive species. That's the term I needed to use.
So it's got a lot of prey. It doesn't have any predators.
Yeah. So as a result, like I said, their populations are booming, and it's a big problem because it's naturally taking out a lot of the indigenous species that are already in Florida that are its prey. That it can, that's another issue is just the invasive species. So
they get brought over. Like you look at, even historically, animals they get brought over country, from one country to another, and they bring rats came here from Great Britain or the UK. They get. Great Britain, UK.
It could be both.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. They both talk weird. They all got mush mouth. But they came over and brought a ton of animals, like rats and chickens and stuff like that, and it brought disease, especially when the first colonial people came here. They brought smallpox, which biological warfare wasn't
smallpox blankets. Yeah,
the smallpox blankets. It's it wasn't biological warfare that they knew they were starting, but it's just disease that people weren't. There's indigenous tribes right now that if we go up, I give them a hug and I cough, they'll probably die because they were just exposed to something they've never been exposed to. So, back to your vegetarian lifestyle, which what has been a really good substitute for your protein source for you?
So I'm lacto-ovo, which just means that I still will have dairy products and egg products. So most of the times that's where I will replace, because it's a more complete protein, because there's also an argument, and I'll be there all day for it, that, animal proteins are, complete in themselves. So you have the essential amino acids that you need and everything. It's where there's a lot of plant-based ones like soy, hemp, pea proteins, where you don't always get all of those. But the milk ones and the egg ones are going to be a little bit still more complete. So usually I go for that. So egg whites are pure protein. I used to drink them. A lot of people get very turned off by that. I don't drink them anymore. Because it's not, like I said, it feels weird in your stomach. It's not great. Cook them. It's just a lot to eat though too at some points when you're trying to hit your macros. But egg whites are great, pure protein. Milk is great. I get fat-free milk, but you can get, like I said, you'll have a little bit of sugar in that, but as long as you're not going keto, which I don't really recommend for most people anyway. But it's. We can get into that too, but
there's diets that are just so weird out there, and I've got my certain opinions on it. But then again, we'll get into that here shortly in a bit. I'll write that one down so we don't forget about it. So sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah. So anything any milk products, cottage cheese is great. Also, cottage cheese has a lot of.
It's gross, dude. It's molded milk.
Yeah,
it's old milk. It's nasty.
Yeah, we all have our different tastes, but but it's like I said, it's got a lot of protein in it. It's casein protein, so it's also really good to have later in the day, so it'll break down a little bit slower. What else? I'll have soy. I know that soy, a lot of people are feel a certain way about soy.
Anti-soy.
Really?
I am very anti-soy.
For what matter?
The reason being is that the studies that I've read from it is it increases estrogen and decreases testosterone. And obviously I like to increase my testosterone and decrease my estrogen as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Even so much so that I just started taking Fidosia agrestis and what's the other one? I'll remember it here in a second. It's sitting
like
out there.
Something Ali that's like really big.
Tenga Ali.
Tenga Ali is a big one. Yeah.
So I've read studies on that. Listen to Andrew Huberman's podcast. If you guys like scientific stuff, like research, Andrew Huberman does tremendous work.
Okay, I'll check him out.
The dude is awesome, and he's all over the place now. But I just recently started those, and then it's a natural way of increasing testosterone levels up quite 100 to 200 points, and then also that's with the Tenga Ali and the Fidosia agrestis, and it also helps with the testes and keeping them at a good size.
Don't want small testes.
You can't have small testes.
No,
you got small testes. You got small nuts.
You can't walk around the locker room like that.
There's these old guys at the gym.
Oh,
dude.
Oh,
it's
God. All right.
It's bad.
I was born and raised,
bad.
like I said, playing sports, and there is no shame in being naked in the locker room. But old men, stop talking to me as I'm seated on a bench when you're naked, like with one leg up, like on it, and like just talking. Like, I don't want to talk to you when you're naked. Like there's a line. Like, get dressed. Like, like you can get naked, get dressed. In a timely fashion, and everybody feels better about it. This is a PSA. This is a PSA.
I tell you what. So what you'll see with old guys is they'll take their towels, they get it ready, they take all their clothes off, they take their towel. You would think that towel would go around the waist.
No,
it never. It goes right up over their their shoulders, and they're sitting there, and I'm like, dude, there's not. I mean, I
envy the pride in a way.
They have a lot of I in their body. There's no shame.
There's no shame.
And there are times where it's like you have to say something.
Yeah.
Like I get to a point I don't get annoyed easily, but I've gotten to a point now it's like I'm not old, but I'm a little bit older to where I feel comfortable being like, nah, bud, we're not doing that in here.
Yeah,
like,
I said
if you're gonna stand there and talk to me, put your fucking pants on.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Like, please.
I don't want to see that thing kind of winking at me.
Yeah, that's right. Like,
I feel like it's winking.
I got 3 eyes staring back at me.
Yeah. Man, there's 2 heads.
Yeah.
Right here. I'm not enjoying this.
No.
All right, so what were we talking about? We were just talking about
I think
natural testosterone levels and reason why I'm anti.
And soy. So I have seen conflicting. I said it conflicts with what you said, but out of respect, that soy, like I said, soy-based products do have a type of estrogen, but it's phytoestrogen, right?
Teach me.
So the phytoestrogen, the amount that you would need to consume of soy to actually have a visible, like a impact on your estrogen levels would be more than you could, right? Because it's not even like estrogen itself; it's phytoestrogen. And it's just about like the quantity of soy you would have to actually consume to change your testosterone level or your estrogen level more so would be enormous, and nobody's going to consume that. So your body would clear anything it needed to before anything would start piling up and changing.
Phytoestrogen.
Phytoestrogen.
FITO or
PHYTO.
Whoa.
Yeah.
College? No college.
No.
That just tells you how stupid words are. That's what it is.
No. Like I said, in my college days, I've met a lot of educated idiots.
Oh, I've met quite a few.
College doesn't make you smart people. Like I said, I've met some very smart people that had very little formulative education. I've met very dumb people that went to college a lot. So
I have met more educated idiots than I have uneducated. Only the reason why is because I think with people getting a degree, they feel as if that they're elevated among other people, which when they do that, when they're wrong on something, it shines much more against them. Because obviously in my workplace, I work with guys who are very educated guys, like jack of all trades, but almost every one of them don't have a college degree. But the ones that do have college degrees, that you can tell that they're a lot smarter, but they're humble about it. So when you're humble about it, I think they'll let you off on the hook if you're wrong. But if you're not, they will not let you off the hook.
Well, that's the thing is, like, if somebody comes up to you and they're super brash about being wrong, you're going to be a lot less likely to be forgiving once you point them out, because it's the Dunning-Kruger effect is what it's called.
What's that?
It's like there's this weird effect that the people that are less educated, like not so much, so not less educated as to say like, formula of education, like, like doing your university or whatever. But the people that, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, dumber think that they're smarter. And then the people that are smart are like I said, more like I said, intelligent, wise, however you want to. There's so many ways you could, like you said, you could think about being smart. Smart's not just a one way, like a one faceted thing. That they usually are a little bit more doubtful of their intelligence, as the people that because the people that usually are the loudest and the most brash about what they know are usually projecting, more or less. And they said most people that like, because it's very like Socratic in itself, right? It's very like Socrates is like it's all about like admitting that you're ignorant, gets you closer to the truth, gets you closer to, like I said, being more intelligent.
Because it gives you the possibility of you being wrong on something,
and it gives you more the possibility to learn. Like if you think you know everything, like we all know like somebody that thought they knew everything, you were trying to teach them something, but you can't teach somebody that thinks they know everything anything.
Correct.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all because they've already, like I said, think that they know it all. So they're past salvation in a way until they change their mindset. And so that's what the Dunning-Kruger effect, or even like what Socrates talks about, or I guess what Plato writes about Socrates talking about is so be more okay with like not knowing everything and being ignorant, because if you accept that, it gives you more chance for growth.
Yes. Otherwise,
if you set your ceiling so low, like you'll never grow out of it.
I've noticed especially when I started doing this, is that it's not the more dumb I act, but the more questions and like curiosity, like killed the cat. Like the more times that I'm just sitting there like, if I just pretend like I don't know, even if I have an inkling about like the only thing I know about estrogen is that I don't want it all in my body. Like that's all I know. Like I don't know, like I do know that with certain levels of testosterone, I have to have a certain level of estrogen. I do understand that. There's a healthy balance in that.
Of course.
But instead, I don't want it to get like this. I mean, I want my testosterone. Here's the limit. I want it up here. And I want my estrogen as healthy, as low as possible.
Yeah.
That's my goal. But with, obviously teaching me about the phytoestrogen, I didn't know about that. But there's that whole idea of just being curious and asking questions, even if you already possibly know the answer to it, you'll still probably learn something. Which is the reason why, like, I used to be really against vegetarians, because I was like, I never wanted to really talk to one.
Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong.
It just seems weird.
There's a lot of people out there that are vegetarians that they kind of turn a lot of people off because they're so outspoken about it.
And they say some crazy shit.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, because like, that's the thing that like people need to understand is that there's assholes in everything, right? No matter what like people identify, like you can identify as this, or that. There's always going to be a poor example of that person, like that group, right? So there's bad versions of vegetarians. There's bad versions, like I said, there's like I've met people that say that they're carnivores and they only eat meat, right? And then they're just like very much over the top about it, like like, well, if you don't eat meat, I'm going to eat double meat for you. I'm like, all right,
I can just eat your portions for you.
I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to stop you. Like, you live your life the best way you want to. But it's like, it's kind of silly that you like something that about what I do changes the way you're going to do things in your life. So there's always, like I said, I've met vegetarians that were very judgy. I've met omnivores that were very judgy. I've met people from all different faiths, religions, races that were very judgy. It had nothing really to do with what they believe so much, or what they, like I said, the lifestyle that they led, I guess, like that defined their lifestyles is just like who they were as a person.
I would say it's more the approach, because like if you come across and you come and tell me you shouldn't be eating meat, you should be a vegetarian, I'll be a lot more offended and want to be defensive, and I'm going to try to defend why I eat meat, which I really don't have to. But if you're like, hey, this is the reason why I don't eat meat, and then just think about it.
Yeah.
I might actually do more thinking about it. Like, man, what would life be like if I didn't eat meat? It wouldn't be as tasty. Like, meat tastes delicious. Have you ever had Wagyu beef steak?
I had it at the time.
It's so good. It is delicious. And I want to have that every day of my life. I just can't afford it, obviously.
Yeah.
So like when someone is a lot more pushy on it and saying you have to live this way, I think that's what turns people off to everything.
Well, yeah, because
it's not open up to the possibility of it working in your life or being effective.
Well, yeah, because if you think about, if anybody tries to present you with any kind of idea and they're like saying that, no, the way you're living is wrong and this is why you should live like this because I do this, and like just they reinforce the point that you're wrong or you're a bad person. Everybody like that they stop pretty much like listening to you from the start, right? You never get your foot in the door with anything by being judgmental and over the top. Like you're embedding a splinter more than anything. You're driving a bad point home. It's like if you're actually just more like like that's why when people ask me like that's the thing is like most of the time when it gets brought up that I'm a vegetarian, it's people asking me about it because they're curious about it. It's not like I'm a vegetarian, and this is why I'm better than you because it's not. And like I don't think I'm better than people because I don't eat meat. I just don't because of the reasons that we laid out in the beginning of this like I said, the podcast. It's just that's me, and if you're interested in that and you want to try it out, great. If you have any questions, let me know how I can help you. If it's not for you, then it's it's not for you. I hope people, like I said, like understand the whole consumption thing and like being, and I think once again, it's kind of fun to like think of efficiency. It's just like, wow, like, like the energy transfer is going on way better than this because I'm eating this, but it has nothing to do with like, you're a bad person because you eat meat. And like, I would never say that because that's not what I believe. It's like, you're like, maybe you eat meat doesn't mean you're a bad person. Just because you're a vegetarian doesn't mean you're a good person. It's like the very Star Wars asking like only a Sith deals in absolutes, and it's very true because it's it's nuanced. Everything's nuanced. So yeah.
So what I would like to think about is, and I didn't do any research on this part yet. I saw a little bit in a couple of the videos that I've watched. One of them I sent to you after I watched the rest of that video because I sent it to you and I was about 3/4 of the way done. I'm like, this ain't that bad. I figured, I was like, well, I think there's kind of an agenda being pushed because he said every blood type should be vegetarian or you'd be the healthiest as a vegetarian. And the ideas that he brought up were everyone lost weight. Everyone lost between 10 to like 40 pounds. And then everyone felt like they had more energy. Well, then I started listening to another study about a placebo effect on two people who were given milkshakes, two groups of people that were given milkshakes. Yeah. And you've probably heard of this one. Maybe. They said this milkshake is high in fat, high in carbs, high in sugars. It's really unhealthy. Drink it. This milkshake is really low in fat, low in sugars, and it's got a lot of protein and it's really healthy for you. Drink it. And then the people, they drank it and they did their blood work. They checked up with them later on that day and the next day. And once the blood work came back, they found that the people who drank the milkshake that were told that it was really unhealthy and it was high in fat, high in sugars, high in carbs, their insulin spiked. And their cortisol levels were
stress.
Exactly. So a lot of the big word stuff that was, I can't remember off the top of my head, was elevated or at a higher risk. The people whose milkshake was healthier, their levels were extremely healthy.
Was it the same milkshake?
It was the same milkshake.
I was like, I didn't know about the study, but I was like,
yeah, it was the same milkshake. But what that says is, and I do agree with like, eat what your blood type says. If your blood type is a certain, it's veganism, or is it vegan? Is it still veganism or is it vegetarian still? Or is that two separate things?
So the big distinction between vegetarianism to veganism is like that vegans don't eat animal products or animal byproducts.
Okay.
So milk's off the table, eggs are off the table. Vegetarians will eat animal byproducts, but just not animals. Like that's the big differentiation.
Dude, I'm lactose intolerant, so I'm already halfway there.
So you're part vegan. You didn't know it.
Vegan.
Yeah.
Oh my! I won't accept that. I won't accept being called
vegan and you didn't even know it.
Take that back. No.
You heard it here, guys.
Don't hear it here. Unhear it. Unhear that. I can't be part of that. No, I'm lactose intolerant, and it just messes me up if I have milk. Now, if I want to have a good time and stay at home,
take your lactate pill and
that's
hope
what
for the
I do.
best.
And I just say, I'm gonna have some ice cream tonight. I'm gonna make this risk. But like, there was a time I went on a date with a girl, and she's like, "Can we get some ice cream?" And I was like, I can't say no.
Gotta live in the moment. Yeah. She wants to go get ice cream. Guess
the
we're
date's
going to get ice cream.
I guess we're getting ice cream. And I'm like, yeah, the date's about over anyways. And she's like, oh, I figure we can hang out a little bit. I'm like, yeah, sure. And we had ice cream. And dude, my stomach was like, it was like aired up like a balloon. And I was like, my stomach hurt so bad. I was getting cramps because that's typically what I get is I get the cramps. And then obviously sometimes I just have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Of course.
And so like I'm sitting there and my stomach felt like my pants were tightening because it just kept like getting, it was like a balloon getting ready to pop.
It's like me with pasta.
Oh, dude. And I remember like telling her, like I started to sweat and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, I said, honestly, I'm lactose intolerant. She's like, well, why'd you have ice cream with me? I'm like, I don't know. Like you really wanted it. And I it was going well. And I thought it would be the end.
Yeah,
I really just wasn't.
I didn't want to see if you were prejudiced against lactose intolerant people, you know.
No, now I don't care.
I was going to kick that can down the road until next time. I tell them
ahead of time, I'm like, I'm lactose intolerant, but I'll still eat some ice cream with you. But I got to go home.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting to a place where there's a lot of lactose-free ice cream. So.
Oh, yeah, there is.
So, like, we're getting there. It's getting better.
And, like, I like when people say, like, I'm gluten-free. I'm like, well, why are you gluten-free?
Yeah.
Well, I have an allergy to it. Perfect.
Cool.
Great answer to it.
Anything?
Yes. Like perfect answer to it. But when you just say, well, gluten's bad, I'm like, everything's bad. Like water's bad for you in consumption rate.
Yeah.
But like you do need sugars, you do need fats, you do need oils, you do need omega, you do need protein, you do need carbs, like to survive. Now,
oh, absolutely.
There's certain people with like Jordan. You know who Jordan Peterson is?
Yeah.
Jordan Michaela Peterson. Michaela's his daughter. Jordan's got a disease where he eats only just meat and it's cured his disease. And he's lost a ton of weight. He sleeps less but feels more rested when he wakes up, which is like blows my mind.
Yeah.
I've thought about doing that.
Yeah. I was like, if that works for you, like I said,
exactly,
go for it, you know?
So what do you think about people eating for their blood type? Did you notice any difference in your blood work if you had it done before and after?
I just want to make a couple points about the milkshake thing.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
First, because since you brought it up. So, 2 big points. You know, I'm just going to, I am not a nutrition or dietitian, but it is simple enough to say that if you want to lose weight, people, you have to be in a caloric deficit. That's like something that like try to get through to people all the time, you know, like fad diets.
Can you explain a caloric deficit to those who don't know what
that is? Yeah. So you should have a basal metabolic rate to start out with, which is how many calories, like say you sit at home on your butt all day, like you're still going to burn so many calories because you're alive. You know, like you said, your bodily functions have to happen. You're probably going to move at least a little bit. So like for instance, my basal metabolic rate is 2,300 calories. If I consume 2,300 calories and I don't do any activity that day, I will be in like maintaining my weight. So, but you have to, like with the basal metabolic rate, say you are active, like you do go work out, say you burn 400 pounds, 400 calories.
Wow.
You're amazing. you're a magic man, and or woman. But say you burn 400 calories. So if that's me, that means now like I said, to maintain, I need 2,700 calories now because we're adding to the 2,300. And so, but let's say I want to lose weight though. And like I said, if I consume 2,700 calories, then I'll maintain. Well, let's knock off like 500, right? And so let's bring it down my total calories today to 2,200. And if I do that for 7 days, in theory, that's going to be 3,500 calories I've taken away. I should lose about a pound of body fat. And I always recommend people, when you're losing weight, do the slow and steady race. Do not do the yo-yo thing, because like most people that, you know, we always hear about the stories about like people that lose a lot of weight really quickly. Unfortunately, a lot of the times they have bounce back because you need to like you know, like work your way into like a rhythm of life. You need to work your way into a situation where you're creating these good habits, or that's like, I don't even say good habits, but habits that are more aligned with the lifestyle you want, right? So like to do that, you need to do that slowly and over time. That's that's going to be the most advantageous way for it to do it in the long term. So like you say, you lose a pound of body fat that first week because you're in a caloric deficit of 500 calories. And like I said, over 7 days, that adds up to 3,500, and that's supposedly supposed to be about what a pound of body fat should be made of. So like I said, figure out your numbers. If you guys, like I said, more than welcome to reach out to me if you need any help with that. But it's like, it's pretty simple math. Like I said, just the hardest part might be finding out what your basal metabolic rate is. You'll have to do some kind of scan or a pod to do that usually. And then just figure out those numbers. And like I said, it's really easy to plug in, get yourself an app to track your stuff by. If you want to do it by weight, that's what I do. So I know how much I'm consuming that day. And then, figure that out. Like I said, that's the only way you can really lose weight. So, because the thing is like what you were talking about was that the milkshakes were the same. And this is also something that I want people to know is that, like, if you mess up on your diet or you mess up and you eat more than you're supposed to, let it go. Let it go. And just like anything in life, just like learn from it. Like, you can't fix a mistake that you already committed. And it's not really a mistake. It's like, think of it as more of a learning situation, like a chance to learn something. Because if you freak out about messing up for like a meal or something, you will raise your cortisol levels because you're stressing yourself out. And that will not help you. That would actually make it worse than if you just have the mentality to not get stressed out about it. Don't raise your cortisol levels. Just let it go. Be kind to yourself. A lot of the process of losing weight or getting in shape is, like I said, figuring out who you are, like, and being okay with it. And then you can move forward. And it's the same way with, like I said, making mistakes. Like, just you ate more than you were supposed to, or like I said, it just wasn't what you were supposed to have to fit your macros that day. Let it go. It's all right. Because like I said, all you'll do is you'll compound the problem by raising your cortisol levels, your estrogen levels with the cortisol, because you're just getting stressed out, and your body will be more likely to store it. So, I just said, just in general in life, be kind with yourself. I think that helps a lot of things, but with that especially. So I think that were the 2 points. Like I said,
I find the placebo effect to be very interesting, though, because they even do it with.
It's very real. Yeah,
it's very real, 100% real. So going through a situation for me, a very highly stressful situation, I went through another stressful situation shortly after my first traumatic experience. My traumatic experience was a divorce.
Yeah.
And then the very next traumatic experience 4 days later was an infant death.
Yeah.
So dealing with both of those, perception and pain from previous trauma, mine was pretty closely knitted. It took away the pain from the second one because of dealing with past trauma, obviously. But the placebo effect that it had on me was, it's just a fake baby right here, and it's not going to be breathing. It's going to die. But this is way worse. But if I would have changed my mindset of this is way worse, and then I would have gotten over the divorce part pretty quickly, I think. But instead it was the reverse.
Yeah.
I got over the infant death a lot quicker. Literally, as I'm doing it, I was over it already. But it didn't neglect care. Care was still top notch and everything, but emotionally it just didn't affect me.
Yeah.
But this placebo effect of that, because I talked to a psychiatrist about it afterwards, but the placebo effect from it was
which is good. Also, everybody, like, therapy and psychiatry is for everybody. Don't ever be ashamed of it. Go get it. Like, that's huge. Like you said, like, I love that you're talking about that too. That's great.
That's a big thing. And so, like, with this podcast, I talk about with first responders and the experiences they go through. And people in the military as well. And I also didn't even know veterinary technicians.
Really?
Did you know that they're like top 3 in suicide rates for careers?
I did not know that.
But think about it. You've got these cute, cuddly little animals coming in every single day, and either you're having life-saving surgery that they don't survive with, they have to get put down and their owners aren't even there, or their owners are there, and it's just an emotional experience every single day. Like the stress of dealing with these, like, I love animals. Obviously, you met my dog.
Yeah.
Love her. Through the insurance company. I don't have a dog here, but it's
off-site dog. Off-site dog.
Yeah. But it's, I care about animals. I couldn't be a veterinary technician because there's no way I could put an animal down.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, you're old and sick. Like, I wanted to take care of you until you stop breathing. But like, you got to be the one to push that. And I didn't know how stressful it was for them. I had a vet tech on for one of my episodes. Her name was Catherine. But she talked about that. I couldn't believe it until I looked it up.
Yeah. It's somebody that's dedicated their whole life to, like, saving animals. You know, like, think about, like I said, somebody that's maybe, like, dreamed of being that since they were a little kid because they wanted to help animals, and they're like, here I am, like, putting them down. Like, it has to be stressful.
Do the exact opposite of what you dreamed of.
Yeah. Like,
you're doing your nightmare.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I'm so glad you bring that up too, because it's like, I've never thought about it that way, but it's true. It's very true. to where, yeah, that's
But
wild.
the suicide rate is high for them.
Yeah.
It's top 3 in professions. For a while, it was actually number 1 for career suicide rates.
Wow.
But to bring back with psychiatry and seeing a psychologist and stuff, or clinical psychologist. No, it's good. It depends on what works for each person. Everyone's different. Obviously, we all know that. For me, when I saw a psychiatrist, it did not work for me.
Yeah.
What worked for me was sitting down and talking about it. I vlogged. So I've got over 20 hours of vlogging experience now with I just sit here, I turn the camera on, and I just talk directly either into the camera or just off, but I just sit there and just talk about what's going on in my head. And then afterwards I listen to it. And then I realize I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm worried about what someone thinks that I look like.
Yeah.
I'm worried that I won't find, like, I'm worried that she did this. I'm worried about, if money's going to be here tomorrow. Like, I can't believe I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
But just sitting there talking about it and recording it, then listening back to it, you realize how much of a complainer that you are of pointless things that don't truly matter.
Yeah.
And then
that's
it put it in my perspective of, dude, I'm kind of being a bitch. Like, now it's not the term that everyone's related to, but it's just like, I'm not on point with, my physique that I really like. My shoulders aren't big enough. My jawline's not there. That's probably why
I love your jawline. What are you talking about?
Thank you. So you know how you do the whole, like, the mewing thing or whatever? Like, I've been practicing that. It does not look good, because when I realized what I have to do, the underbite that I have is comical. So, like, you do like something like that, then you get the line, but my underbite is like insane. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like, this is my jawline. If you like it, you like it.
Yeah, you're like, woo, look at it. It's like it's like the payoff's it's not worth it.
It's not worth it. So, but for what I found, for me, that worked for therapy was talking to my friends and cracking jokes. But also talking to myself about it and walking myself, and a lot of scripture helped me out.
That's great.
God helped me out. He got me through it, to be honest, because he placed the people in my life. He also let that stuff happen in my life, because hopefully in some point I'm going to help somebody else. But,
that's a beautiful way to look at it, and like,
what I'm hoping.
That's a beautiful way to handle it. Like, it's crazy because like, I think that you always learn about, like, when you're like, they tell you like to write things down, but you turn it to the classic example of like writing things down to see like what you really think and whatever, but you turned it into like a vlog, which is like, it's really cool. Like I said,
well, thanks, man.
That's just really cool. And like I said, it's a beautiful way to, like I said, to really, like, work through those problems, because unfortunately, as human beings, we do have so many things that we worry about ourselves, about our appearance, about who we are, about our careers, about our friends, family, whatever, and then when you really think about it, or like you said, you share it with somebody else, and then to like get it, like to reflect off of them, like to get their opinion about it, or you write it down, or the vlogging, like you said, you're kind of like, wow, it's like, I'm being silly, like like what we were talking at the beginning is like, like we're having receding hairline. It's just like, in the grand scheme of things, like, that's silly. That's a silly thing to get hung up on, and then when you put it in perspective, especially with a lot of things going on in the world, you're like, like that's really small potatoes that, I've got alleys going on in my hair versus a lot of the bigger problems that I should probably be focusing on, something that I could actually control versus like, my hairline's just gonna go. I've seen what all the men in my family look like. Who am I? Who did? Yes. I knew this was gonna happen. Like, I don't know.
My future was laid out. It was printed in front of me. And it was destiny. Yes. Yeah. For my head, dude, I've got obviously no hair on my head, but thank God I've got a decent bald head. Like, it's not oddly shaped. Now I have a giant head. This is a double XL, and it's comfy finally. But like what Jordan Peterson said that I've tried to do this a lot of is, don't compare yourself to who you are going to be tomorrow or someone else. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. So I always try to look at what did I do yesterday? Like, I'm going to do something hard today. Yeah. I did something hard yesterday, and it started off my day just great. Like this morning, I got home from work, I dove into my ice bath. Yeah. And I just laid there. Yeah. And I'm like, doing some of that. What's that breathing called? The Wim Hof breathing. So I did a little bit of the Wim Hof breathing, which I'm still new at. It's weird. It's hard. So you can educate me on that, because I'm blissfully ignorant on that one. I am not very well educated in the. I watched his whole video on it, And I still like, it's not that I couldn't understand it, but I have to listen to it again and practice it while he's doing it.
Yeah.
But it's a breathing technique to increase your heart rate, but it also can increase your metabolism rate. It can increase your adrenaline, which I do know with my career in firefighting, controlling your breathing. So there's guys out there that so typically our packs, our SCBAs that we wear, is a self-contained breathing apparatus. Divers use something pretty similar. Ours just can take heat, heat-related temperatures to an extreme. And then also we have pass devices placed on them, so that way if a guy doesn't move for a certain amount of time, typically it's about between 15 to 30 seconds, it starts to alarm in 4 different stages. And then it goes off to the final stage, which you can't shut it off like by wiggling it, because that's why they call it the pack twerk.
Okay.
Because everyone does this, or they're doing that because they have to get this little sensor inside to move.
Or else it will go off.
If it goes, yes, then it'll go off. But there's breathing techniques to do. So there's like skip breathing. There's I like to do the as I'm exhaling, I hold and then exhale again. So,
wow.
So I like that because it gives me something to focus on as I'm doing whatever. Now, do I get a ton of fires here where I work at? No, but when I do get them, I change my breathing up in each one of the scenarios. So, like if we're doing something, what my goal is to make this bottle last as long as possible. They're technically, 50 or 40 minute, 30, 50 minute bottles. People with work and you're breathing, it's literally just because you have to force in, force out. So it goes down tremendously, 15 to 30 minutes of work. It's 50, 60 minute bottles. But there's guys that can make these bottles last longer than 60 minutes. Now, they're not doing a ton of work, but they're sitting there and they're just breathing with it. And it's just all breathing techniques. The same with Wim Hof is a breathing technique for extreme temperatures, but also you could do it outside of it as well. It's like more for therapy, for meditation, which, I go into a meditative state when I go into that because I'm trying not to think about it.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing, too, that I've noticed, I've been doing it for over a year now.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I've noticed when getting into the water, obviously, it's cold. It's in the 40s for me. Mine's set at around 40 some degrees. But when I'm getting into it, I know going into this, I'm like, I know it's cold. I hate doing it every morning, but I just go ahead and just do it because by the time I get into it, if you're moving, if you continuously move around while you're in the water, it gets colder and colder. Because it's almost like your body is radiating heat. Well, when it's radiating heat, it's turning that water that's closest to you to a little bit warmer. Is it multiple degrees warmer? No, I would assume that it's maybe half a degree at most warmer, but it's still warmer. So when I'm in there, I try to move around. Obviously, I had to get a pretty big deep freezer for me to fit in so that at least I can move around in. And it moves water, sloshes it out, and goes off the sides, but I only do it for a little bit because I don't want to lose all the water.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that in my mind, if I just embrace the suck and push through it, it is just... It's a walk in the park almost.
Yeah.
But if I'm sitting there and I'm worried about what's going on, I'm thinking about how much this sucks. The cold water is miserable. It's making this worse. It makes it seem 10 times longer. But then I don't get into a state where I'm chill. But with the Wim Hof breathing, it to me has been working with controlling my own breathing, focusing on something else, and my body feels like it's warmer.
Yeah.
Whether it is or isn't, I don't really know.
Yeah, but like placebo effect.
It's exactly what it is.
Placebo effect is real for a reason. So I was getting PTSD because I was remembering when I was at IU in track and field, and we would have to do ice baths after, and so you would get in and you'd be like, okay, I'm good, and then they had a jet in it. And they would turn the jet on, and I was like, oh, okay. I just I was like, don't cut that audio and then paste it somewhere else. It was a little bit suspect. But
if I had a soundboard, I would do that.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
But it was horrible. Like I said, you're just like, you finally get ready, and they're like, all right, jet.
It makes it so much worse.
Yeah.
It makes it so much worse.
So I remember, like I said, the difference, because when you're not getting smacked with the cold water, you're like, you can get into a state where you are more or less meditative, and like having, like I said, meditate not as much as I probably would like to, but it's even the truth of just sitting there, right? If, and then there's different thoughts and, like in schools on meditation, some of them, like it's like, go ahead and think through the things you want to think. Some things are more like clear your mind and just go for that. But it is true that when you have a lot you're thinking about, and even if you're trying to meditate for like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, which for a lot of people, that might not be a lot. Some people meditate for hours at a time. Like, you're like, if you sit there and you're thinking about meditating while you're meditating, it feels like forever, right? Versus really just finding like some kind of calm and just like this other state where you're just kind of like not thinking about anything specifically. Thoughts and things might come up, like, float up to you, but you're not actively thinking. You're passively just having things come to you, and then it creates such a different experience when you finally just hit that moment where you're like kind of like, I'm not focusing on one thing, and then now it doesn't seem like time's going faster. That's for what it felt like forever.
What has been your most favorite meditative state you've been in? Were you doing something while in that state, or were you just still?
My favorite like meditative thing was like probably when I was living the first year I lived in France. Like I was in a very stressful situation. That's kind of like when I turned to meditation, because it brings me back to center in a way. And I sat down and meditated, and I almost, like I said, it was a weird moment of like, where there's like something happened during my meditation, and like, we can get into it more if we want to or not. It doesn't matter to me. But like something that brought me clarity. Right. And it was almost like, it was weird. It was like a mind boggling scenario. And then I came out of it and I was like, everything's going to be okay. Right. And then there's just deep breath. And then I wasn't so stressed out, and I had another perspective of looking at the stressful situation that I was in. And it just brought me back to center. Like, that was probably my favorite meditative moment. So yeah, because like not we're getting in it too much is like, so I've also had, like I said, and everybody does, like had traumatic moments in my life. One of the most traumatic moments for me was losing my father at a young age. And so in that moment, it was like, I had this moment where I felt like somebody was telling me like, it's going to be okay. And it felt like it was him. And for some reason, that was enough in that moment for me to be like, yeah, whatever you believe or don't believe, like, it doesn't matter, because that's what came to me in that moment. And just having what felt like him tell me, it's okay, take a deep breath, you're going to be all right. I was like, that's what I needed, So, and if anybody that's ever lost a parent or lost somebody close to them, sometimes you just need reassurance from somebody that's not there anymore. And you seek that for like the rest of your life in a way, like, just like, am I living the like life that they would want for me? Would they be proud of who I am? And when you have a moment like that where you feel like there is some kind of pride and there's like some reassurance and also like some like support, like, that everything's going to be okay. Like it means the world to you. And like I was meditating, and that's the first thing that like instantly popped in my head, that moment. And that just came from just sitting there, like meditating.
That sounds like it would be an extremely emotional.
It was. If I remember correctly, I was crying by the end of it. Like, and like I said, it's okay to cry. Like, and that's how
yes, it is okay to cry in certain places and times in front of certain people.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't go around don't go to the gym and be like, start to cry in the middle of the gym unless you got an actual problem or something.
Yeah,
like, it's okay. It's okay to cry.
It's okay to cry because, in a way, we think of it, and this is like men's health is something we can get into too, is that, being strong is be like not crying and not being emotionally vulnerable in anything. But I've always felt that it's like anything like made of metal. It's like if it bends a little bit, it'll probably hold a little bit better, right? Versus if it doesn't bend, it'll break and be brittle. It's like steel that's over tempered, and more or less. And so like if you give a little bit, like I said, that's another great memory I have from my childhood, is like my grandfather died. And, I was like, oh, I'm not going to cry though. Like I was 8 years old, and I was trying to be a hard ass. And I just remember my dad looking at me, cause he was still alive at the time, and being like, it's okay to cry, if you want to cry. And so I did, cause I was like, I am really upset about this loss. And so I remember being at the funeral and crying, and like the first time, cause I always, like I was raised like, rub some dirt on it, don't act like a girl, like all that stuff, like how that toxic masculinity.
Don't be a sissy about it.
Yeah.
There are things now. I'll talk more about masculinity and stuff after you're done.
Yeah.
I'm write that one down.
So, but yeah, and like you're saying, there's a time and place, right, for everything, but don't feel like you can't, right?
Correct.
Because that's why, like I said, there's so many male suicides, is because guys feel like they can't talk about their feelings to anybody because to do it is to be weak. When it's really the weakness is in feeling that is almost like the reverse of like a good placebo effect. It's a bad one. Mm-hmm. It's like you're actually projecting weakness because you think it's weak to be vulnerable. When if anything, it's like, like pick and choose who you're going to be vulnerable with.
Exactly.
Pick and choose, because some people won't appreciate and, like I said, won't understand how much, like I said, you're giving to them, right? Some people don't appreciate that, or they don't know what to do with it as well. Like maybe they're a little bit more innocent than just, being an asshole and not knowing how to handle your feelings. But there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable and sharing your emotions with people that are close to in your life. If anything, it makes you stronger because, you're okay with being vulnerable. If you always feel like, like I can't be vulnerable because that's strong. If anything, it's like you're afraid to be vulnerable. If you think of it from a mindset, it's like, like that means that you're weaker because if you can't be, it's like you can't show your back to anybody, right? Mm-hmm. Like some of the, like people that, are the most confident in who they are, like don't really care about who's around them, even if maybe that does put them in a more vulnerable situation, but they're at peace with it and calm with it because they believe in like whatever, mm-hmm. like in a fight or something or whatever. They just, I don't know how to put it in some kind of frame that makes more sense. But if you're more okay with being vulnerable, then that speaks something about the strength that you actually feel and are.
So I agree with that to a point, only because of the states that I've been in the last, not physical states as in country states.
Yeah.
The states of emotions and the ups and downs that I've had the last year. Mm-hmm. For me, if you're in a leadership type role, mm-hmm. showing emotion can really knock down what the perception is in that leadership role of mm-hmm. what people think about you. Mm-hmm. And then there's doubt. Well, if my leader is, whether it's male or female, mm-hmm. is emotionally responsive mm-hmm. with things, then if they're crying about a lot of things, that's not a good, for one, it's not a good look. Two, you're trying to wonder, you're trying to dictate like, what is their mental stability here? Because mm-hmm. if I'm giving them stuff and they're crying about it all the time, they're always vulnerable. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why I think that it's okay to be, if you're a man, it's okay to be vulnerable to a certain point, because I know for me, I cried in front of people I shouldn't have been crying in front of. Mm-hmm. And it completely changed the relationship dynamic that we had. Mm-hmm. So I learned the hard way on that one, mm-hmm. being vulnerable to the right people, i.e. your close friends and mm-hmm. your family. I think, if you have kids, you don't go crying to your kids, because mm-hmm. then you want them to look to you to be that rock, because you need to be that. Yeah, you need to be that support, that rock for them, mm-hmm. which is what masculinity is. You have mm-hmm. to be that rock. Mm-hmm. If you are not being that rock and you are the constant, waves coming at the other person, trying to give them to be the rock, mm-hmm. that's when that relationship dynamic changes and shifts, and then that afterwards, it's going to be very hard to reel it back in to be like, hey man, I'm strong enough for it. It's like, well. Are you though? Like, mm-hmm. because I went through that.
Yeah.
Now with toxic masculinity, I could see the argument on a lot of that stuff. Growing up, obviously, and I've seen it with my sisters and other kids as well. And I remember it from my parents. I remember I can go cry to my mom about mm-hmm. anything. Yeah. I could just be like, I fell down the stairs. Like, mm-hmm. can you take care of me? And then
mm-hmm.
when I would,
but going to dad,
going to dad, yeah. I just go to him and I'm like, I fell down the stairs, and he's just like, you all right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm back off to doing the same thing again. But I'm going up to my mom and I'm like, I fell down the stairs, and she embraces me and holds me. That's when I start to cry because for some reason, I don't know. It's just it just happens.
Well,
so
when we have that same relationship a lot of times, like I said, if you're a heterosexual male, then you would have that with probably your partner as well.
Yeah.
Like they bring that like kind of feminine aspect of like comfort that you can seek out when you are going through some kind of emotional turmoil, mm-hmm. right? I said we seek that also with our partners. Mm-hmm. That being a woman, like I said in the scenario. But the thing is like in a hierarchy, yeah, I completely agree that like if you're in a leadership position, there is some truth that you have to keep it together for your
troops or your crews or
whatever, like
whoever you're leading,
because you're trying to inspire them to you're like calm their nerves. And like I said, and provide like a kind of a soothing aspect because you are calm.
Yeah.
I can agree with that for sure. I think though, is like what I've ever found out, if like my emotional vulnerabilities were shared with somebody that I considered my peer or friend or family, and it wasn't well received, I didn't think so much that it reflected so much on me. Maybe I needed to be more careful, like I said, who I judged to be worthy of sharing that, that vulnerability with. But it also was a reflection of them as a person, right? Because a lot of times people will say that you're a friend to this certain level. They'll say that they're there for you if you need anything. But when you actually go to them for it, they're not as good as they said. They talk more the talk than they walk the walk. And so we have to think as well that that's kind of a reflection of who they are or how your relationship really is. And if you walk away from that thing, like I said, don't feel dumb, because if anything, if they reassured you and you are, like I said, a level-headed person and you're like, this is a person I can share my stuff with, and but it doesn't reflect well with them, like you're if anything, you're winning, because you're like, that person's not who I thought they were. And it's better for me to know that they are who they are at this point rather than to go down this rabbit hole any farther. Right. Mm-hmm. Like if we're not on that level of friendship or, like relationship in general, then, well, now I know that. And I maybe I thought more of it than I did. I should have. And like, maybe that's a little bit me, a little bit you, as most things are. Like I said, there's usually a little bit to go, like nobody's completely innocent if anything, like a lot of times, especially when it comes to relationships. Mm-hmm. There's something like, I could have done this better. I could have done that better.
Self-reflection is always good to have.
Yes. Yes, very much so. But you come to the point where like, well, but like you weren't the kind of friend or relationship that you said you were. Mm-hmm. And that reflects a lot on you too. And like,
then the deception that they've given you, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
But the deception that they give you on, you could share anything with me, but when you share too much to them, then that's when that person will feel like they were just like, I'll explain how I felt when I did it one time. Yeah. I shared too much information to somebody. Mm-hmm. And I got too emotional. Yeah. And then I felt deceived, like they would have been okay with it and understanding, and they weren't. Yeah. And it was a female that I did it to. Yeah. And I felt like I was betrayed. Yeah. And then I didn't want to do it to anybody. Like I didn't want to share with anybody, because I'm like, that's how it made me feel. Like this was horrible. Mm-hmm. Which is why I went to vlogging instead, because no one's going to respond back to me on it, because I could just record it and put it on my computer and it stays there. And then talking to my dog all the time, and then talking to my friends and guys I worked with about it, guys who've been through those situations. Yeah. But that's how I felt after sharing, I thought, too much with that person.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is the classic example of it's almost like overcorrecting a car, right? Yes. You're like, you try to steer back because it was the wrong direction that you were trying to go, but you overcorrected, and now you're not sharing with anybody, which isn't healthy either. Correct. It wasn't so much that you shouldn't share your emotions and be vulnerable with some people. It's just not with that person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, and that's how we live. Like with most of our lives. Most of the times when we make mistakes, we overcorrect in the opposite direction, and then we have to like. It's like the synthesis, or sorry. It's the thesis, antithesis, thesis. I mean, synthesis. Sorry.
That's a lot of thesis.
Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So you have this thought, and then let's say but then you have the opposite thought, or like a different kind of thought. Mm-hmm. But then usually it's kind of like a mixture of the two in the end, because you go from one thing to like overcorrecting, and then you kind of like put them together, and usually it's somewhere in the middle that you should have been, right? Mm-hmm. That's not exactly what thesis, antithesis, synthesis is for all you philosophy buffs out there, but it's something along those lines. We usually overcorrect every time we make a mistake, and then we have to like bring it back down a little bit because we overstated, or we tried to.
Well, that could even be brought into with guys like asking a girl out, or guys hitting on a woman.
Oh, for 100%.
Because I know that it's happened to me before. Mm-hmm. I don't enjoy doing this, but talking to a woman at the gym or a girl at the gym. And typically for most guys, they don't have the experience or they don't get the experience of speaking with a woman at the gym, an attractive woman at that. And once they get that, they're like, okay, wow, she's showing interest in talking to me. Maybe she likes me.
Yeah.
And then you go up to her after a couple times talking to her at the gym, make her feel a little more comfortable. And you're like, hey, I would really like to get some coffee with you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I'm not looking for a relationship. Well, we all know she's not looking at a relationship with you. She's looking for a relationship with somebody else.
Yeah.
Just you're not her type, which is perfectly okay. But that pain that you get from it is like, this is never happening again. And then you just don't talk to anybody.
I'm not putting myself out ever
I'm not
again.
putting myself out ever again.
Rejection in any form, even if it's like, completely acceptable, is painful.
Oh, it's painful to a lot of people. It's painful to guys out there, which is why when I was talking with a girl about this the other day, actually, and I still got this on you. Sorry. I was talking to a girl about this the other day, and I said, have you ever went up to a guy and asked him out? She's like, no, the guy's supposed to do that to me. I'm like, do guys come up and do that to you? She goes, not really anymore. I'm like, do you turn them down a lot? She's like, well, I have before. I'm like, that's probably why. Like, you turn down so many. It takes a lot. I said, do you think you ever could go up to a guy and talk to him? No. I'm like, well, that's how they feel about you. Like, because it is so difficult. But you get to a point where you get more comfortable, but it's that self-doubt. But it's also knowing who you are as a person.
Yeah.
But it's also difficult. Like, you're trying to put yourself out there. You never know, which is why I think we have more in common than we don't. And which is why, like, you go to the gym, you're like, oh, I'll talk to them about fitness, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
Whether it takes off or not. But you have an interesting story about your relationship because your girlfriend lives in France, right?
Yep. She's French.
She is French, and her name is Chloe.
It is Chloe.
Chloe.
Yeah.
So how did you meet her? Talk about that.
All right. So it's kind of a story. So I guess, we got time, so I'll get into it. Usually I give people like the Spark Notes version, but like I said, I guess I can go into it. Yeah. So
wait, let me see if I got coffee. You want to grab another drink at all, or because I can just cut this part out?
Yeah. So perfect. So I was studying abroad in France. I studied at Sciences Po X in Aix-en-Provence. Yeah, I got to say it right. I had way too much education in French to not, at this point. And so, like I said, it was a study abroad program through Indiana University, and I was there for a year. So I'm there. I'd been there for a little bit, and I remember I went into the supermarket, and I was just like, like getting my stuff, and then I hear two American girls struggling to find brown rice. They're looking for brown rice. They're speaking in English. I know, and they're Americans. I can tell by the accent, and they're looking for, fun fact for the podcast is like, so in French, it's not called brown rice. Even when you translate, it's called like complete rice, riz complet. Instead, like they were looking for riz marron, which would be brown rice. That doesn't exist. It's riz complet. And so all I did was I went over and I was like, hey, it's because you guys are looking for this, but you need to be looking for that. And then we found it, and they're like, oh, thanks. And you're like, they're like, how long you been here? And I was like, oh, I've been here for a couple months. We had to do some integration stuff. So we got there earlier than some kids that were studying abroad at the same time. And so I was like, yeah, I've been here for a little bit. And at that point, I've already had been going to my school for a little bit, and I had made we had an international group of friends. We went out, had fun. And so we would go out every Thursday or something, I think is what it was. And so I told them, I was like, yeah, if you guys, because they're like, we don't know anybody. We just got here. I'm like, yeah, just add me, add me on Instagram, because it's the more, like I said, instead of exchanging numbers, it's kind of seen as a more neutral.
Yeah, it's a more safer way for them.
Yeah, don't want to come across too strong. Just just add me on Instagram, and I'll add you back, and I'll message you guys if we go out or something, and you can join us, and you can meet the international group and some French people too that came with us. I was like, cool. So come to find out, and they're like, one of the Americans, she was from California. So my girlfriend, before all this, she did an exchange in California for a little bit. And so this was actually one of her friends, mutual friends. Mm-hmm. And so the next day, the girl from California and my girlfriend, now, they met up to have a coffee, right? And so at some point I just got brought up in the conversation. They say, oh, we met this American And, you know, we followed him on Instagram the other day. And so, like, my girlfriend, like, so she added me. And I remember specifically being like, you know, like, oh, yeah, like, I know this might be random. You don't know me, but I met, you know, I can't remember the California girl's name anymore. It was bad. You know, if she listens in, I'm so sorry. So she's like, yeah, we met, you know, like, this is when she's met when Chloe is messaging me. She was like, you don't know me, but I met with so-and-so the other day. And, you know, I just thought I'd add you to see if you wanted to hang out sometime. And I was just like, whoa, like that was, you know, like kudos to you. Like, cause like that was most direct I think a woman has ever been with me, you know, like, wow. To add me, then sneak, like you said, creep into my DMs, as the kids say. And then, like, so we went for a drink, and, like, you know, like, met each other. And it was a funny story because she went to the wrong place, and so it took time, but we finally got it figured out.
And this was in France.
Okay. This is X. Yeah, and so yeah, we hung out a couple times after that too. I was just in a point where, like, before too long, I knew I was going to have to go back to the U.S. Because this, as the story goes along, you know, like, it went from the start of the year to, like, very quickly being the end of the school year. And I was, like, a couple months out from, you know, going back. And so I was just like, yeah, I just don't, you know, I don't really want to, like, start anything, you know, serious, because obviously I've got to leave, you know, like, let's not get, like, too, like I said, too heavily involved, because I think that it's just going to be, you know, like I said, I'm going to have to go back, right? So I was just like, yeah, I'm not really looking for anything right now. But we stayed friends, you know, because it was something that, as you always should, like, you know, communicate. Communication is so good, like I said. So I just told her where I was pretty early on. And so that's how we got to stay friends. Because if I didn't and I let her along, you know, I don't know if we would be dating today, you know. So yeah, I went back to the U.S. I had one more year to complete my. I had to, like, do one more year of my senior year of undergraduate studies at IU. I did that, and, you know, so in between that time, like, she and I, like, you know, we would, like, react to each other's Instagram stories and, like, you know, exchange a message here and there, but nothing, you know, substantial. But after I graduated, I knew that I wanted to take a gap year in between my undergraduate studies and going into my master's. I knew I wanted a little bit of time away from school. So I applied for a job with an organization called TAPIF, which is teaching assistant position in France. So what I did was I got this contract to go to France to be an assistant professor of English, where I got put with middle schoolers, right? Anywhere from what we would consider as sixth grade all the way to freshmen. Okay, yeah. Sorry. And so I was teaching, and I was teaching in a completely different city, because I had been in Aix-en-Provence when we met. You know, she went with her, like, you know, the whole reason why she was there in the first place too is her brother was actually studying there, funny enough. But when I went back, I moved. When I was working, I was living close to Montpellier, which is about 2 to 3 hours west. Like, both places are pretty much south of southern France, pretty close to the Mediterranean. But I was working in I was working in Agde and Besson. And so I was, like, kind of commuting and whatever, but my friends worked, like, in Montpellier. The whole district was, like, ran within, like, the city of Montpellier. And so we would go there to, like, hang out in Montpellier. And so I was there, like, one night, and we were at the bars, and, like, I posted a story on my Instagram of being there. And then she messages me. She's like, "Are you in Montpellier?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Are you?" And she's like, "Yeah." She's like, I'm going to school here now. And I was like, well, that's weird. And I was like, well, we'll have to, like, you know, catch up at some point or whatever. If you want to, just let me know. And so she ended up coming out with us one night. And, like, you know, of course, the time that we're trying to catch up, everybody wanted to go to, like, the loudest bar possible. So, and I have never, like, you know, like, no matter what age I was, I've never been a loud bar person. I really just go, like, to some place where, like, maybe some, like, some
like a hole in the walls.
Yeah, and, like, light music maybe, but you can still talk, you know, and have a drink and just, like, you know, whatever. I go for more for the conversation than I do anything else. And so, like, we didn't really get to talk much, but I remember, like I said, I ended up, like, walking her back to her place, pouring rain. It was horrible. Like, it was like raining buckets. But, nothing happened. Like, it was just like we caught up a little bit, and she, went back to her apartment. And then like I said, we had gotten an Airbnb that night in Montpellier, so went back to that. And then I remember, like, after that, I had messaged her something. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember she pretty much more or less left me on red after that. And I was like, okay, like that stinks. And like a couple months go by, and like she still hasn't replied. But I was like, at this point, I was just like kind of like working and doing my own thing. Didn't think too much of it. And then she finally like messaged me back with this long message like, hey, just lots been going on, blah blah blah.
For a few months.
Yeah.
Good Lord, that's a lot.
Yeah, I think like I said, there was just like a lot of things going on in her life where she had to focus on rather than anything. And like, she even told me earlier, like later on, she's like, yeah, I wasn't interested. I was just like, like I just emotionally, I was trying to deal with some stuff, and completely cool. But anyway, she's like, like I was actually, and at this point when she messaged me back, I remember I was in Bordeaux because I had some friends also from Indiana University that were doing the same thing I was, but in Bordeaux, so a couple hours away. And we got together for Thanksgiving and everything, and had it in France because, nobody celebrates it. As I tell my mother every time I'm living overseas, she's like, why are you guys having Thanksgiving today? I'm like, Mom, I'm not in the U.S. Only us and the Canadians celebrate that, and the Canadians celebrate it in October. It's crazy. So anyway, so she messages me this long message, explaining like the situation. And I just remember thinking like, don't act desperate. And so I like don't reply for like a couple days, just like giving her some of her own medicines, so to speak. At the time is what it felt like. I was like, I was being kind of like, I'll reply when I get to it, let her think about it. And then I finally replied, and they were like, like she had been apologetic and nice about it. So I was like, okay. I was like, well, we'll go, maybe get something. It was around Christmas time. And so the big thing, like, I don't know if you ever had mulled wine.
No.
But they have all these like little, like, they have these Christmas markets, and they'll have mulled wine. I was like, yeah, let's go get some mulled wine. It's vin chaud, like just means hot wine in French. And so we're like, yeah, cool, that'd be great. And then so I go back to Montpellier, but I'm leaving the next day to go back to the U.S. for Christmas because it's like a week before that, and I like had finished my last day of the year for work, and I had to be back until they have their vacations are so long in France, and it's so amazing.
That's what I've heard.
Oh my God. We can get into that too, but so like I had a lot of time off, and so I was just like I was gonna go back for a couple of weeks. So I remember, like I said, we went out, and like I remember a friend coming. I was like, "Can I come with? Like, care if I come with?" I was like, "Is it, like you guys on a date?" I'm like, "No, we're just friends. Like, like just catching up. So go ahead and come out," because I didn't expect anything. I didn't know what was gonna happen. Like I knew I was interested, but I was like also trying to be a gentleman to the best of my ability and just like let the night go as it did. So, but ended up, that I had at the last train out of Montpellier to get back to where I actually lived was coming. And so I was like, oh, I got to get going. So she walked me like to outside, like close to the train station. And then I remember like I said, we just like look at that weird moment that like, they don't talk about, like when you're growing up, like, but that weird moment that before you kiss, we're just kind of like looking at each other, like, are we about to kiss? And we did. And then I had to like in a kind of like scenic thing where like it's kind of raining. I have to like run to catch my train because I was like behind on time because we had like like I said we were a little like running a little bit behind. I was running behind, she wasn't. And so I remember how like kissing her and being like, I'll see you when I get back, and then running in the rain in like a French town to go get my train and then take it back.
Every movie, about love and romance. Yeah,
and so more or less, I went back to the U.S. and then I remember being like, I don't know what's going on in my love life. I don't know like what we are at this point. And so there was like a weird 2-week limbo where I'm just like, we didn't really talk that much either. I remember that because I think we hadn't figured out how to talk really across like out like when I was in the U.S. That's something we mastered along the lines later. But then getting back to France, and then we hung out like I think like one more time, and they're like, yeah, we're together, and that was 4 years ago. So
you've had a long distance relationship for now 4 years.
Yeah. So the first 6 months or so that we were together, would it be 6 months? More or less, like we lived together in my apartment in Marseille, where I was living, and then Then I had to go back to the U.S. And then I ended up coming back to France. My landlord was actually getting married, and we got invited to the wedding. So I came back to France, but at that time I'd already been accepted for my master's in Geneva. So I was just like I was going to come back for a couple weeks there.
Did you learn any like Swiss German while out in Switzerland?
You know, I wish I had learned. Like I said, I know a little bit of German, like especially having lived in Geneva, that even though it's on the French side, like mostly everything in the supermarkets is marked in French and German because it's the market. Like they're distributing to the whole country, so it makes sense. But like I said, I don't know as much German as I would like to.
It's a weird language.
Swiss German especially. If you ask any German person, they will tell you that like Swiss German is weird to them, and they don't always understand it.
From Germany and Switzerland.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, I'll show you actually. Because a buddy of mine's from there.
Okay.
And that's my trash can. So a buddy of mine's from Switzerland, and he brought me these patches. He's a volunteer firefighter out there, and the other guy is a firefighter at another place in Ville-en-Rhem. I don't know. There's that one. That one's German.
Weile am Rhein.
Oh, Rhyme. That sounds better.
And
then this is Fire. That. There's that one.
Fire. It's like fire.
It's volunteer firefighter. I think. Yeah. And then this one's Hochtfeld. That's what he told me. I'm still learning these though.
It's
weird.
Hochwald. Fire. Yeah. Okay, I didn't know how to say so fly and
because there's differences in dialect for Swiss German and then German.
Yeah.
And then that's another one.
Well, these are super cool.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. He brought me those. So he brought me that, and brought me actually my brother bought me that when he was in Switzerland. That knife over there. That's actually a knife from Switzerland. So the whole box is in.
Yeah,
is in French and all that. Victorinox. Yeah,
it's like a like great mark. I mean, great brand. Mark is the French word for brand.
Yes. Oh, really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yeah, but he brought me some cool stuff, and then I signed. He had an American flag that I signed. I felt weird signing it, and I was like, for one, I'm a nobody, and I'm signing the American flag.
You're an American.
I'm an American, and when I talked with him, like, so what was the patriotism like? And real quick, then we'll get back to your girlfriend stuff. But what was the patriotism like in France for French people? Were they like
so? Americans? I've always thought of the French, and I think this is also why French and Americans tend to butt heads quite a bit. Or like the French are just like the Americans of Europe, more or less.
Really?
There's like a very strong sense of like there's it's not always boiling at the top kind of like patriotism, but it is like underlying in a way that like if you like if you're an outsider and you make fun of France, like they're not going to take it well. But if like French people like rag on their country all the time, kind of like Americans, like you're like, oh, this is going to pots because of this. But if somebody else is like, U.S. sucks and they're not from here, you're just like. It changes the dynamic, right? You're like, eat them alive. You're like, now I have to be patriotic because
we're all gonna turn into omnivores, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Like you have to you switch really quickly because like 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 I said, it's easy to complain about your own country, but when somebody else does it, you're like, you don't get to talk about it that way, or somebody like beats up one of your siblings, you're like, only I get to beat up on him.
I can only kick the shit out of my brother.
Yeah,
no one else can.
Nobody else.
Yeah, because when I talked to my buddy from Germany or from Switzerland, he was saying, I said, what's the differences? And he goes, in his heavy dialect or his accent, he was talking about how the patriotism. He said, just people here will die. A regular guy in the street will die for his country, but you go anywhere else where I'm from, people don't care. Like they just don't. And he's like, it's really cool and it's admirable to see everyone who loves the country that lives in the country.
Yeah, that's great. And like, there is a sense that also, as like the Swiss are very much on their own kind of little island, not literally on an island, but they're like, they're not really a part of much things other than like maybe economic groups. They don't have like any mutual defense pacts really with anybody. Like that's why their defense system is amazing. They have a great geographical location, all surrounded by mountains, and there's only so many ways to get in, and that's why like you always hear about like, oh yeah, the Swiss have like all their bridges ready to blow if anything happens, and like there's some truth to that. Yeah. And then so the Swiss do it a little bit differently too, is like everybody like had more or less. I want to say like I don't want to say everybody has guns because that's not true. Because like no, not all Americans have guns, but they probably do have a higher per capita of like gun per person than most like if not all European countries.
Yeah, because of how small they are.
Well, and it's more of the fact that but their rules are different. You can own guns, but like they said, there's like limited or no ammunition that you can keep with you. Yeah. So, but it's like that's why like they're always ready to defend themselves though too, because if somebody's attacking them as a country, they'll start handing out munitions. And everybody has the guns.
I can see and agree with that to a point, but knowing the government and how they do with dispersing stuff, I wouldn't want to count on them to give me disperse ammunition to me. I'd rather just have a few thousand. Oh my goodness, Lila. Sorry, and I haven't even switched the camera over. Sorry, my dog's coughing right in front of me. I wouldn't want to count on the government to like hand me munitions on anything because I know how they do with everything else.
Yeah, very inefficient.
Yeah, extremely inefficient. But
if your population's
smaller, so that makes more sense. If it works for them, it works for them.
Yeah, because you can still go to like gun ranges and they'll give you ammunition to shoot. It's just you can't take any ammunition like home with you. That's the way that they put it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this weird hybrid, like middle ground. It's like not that they don't have guns. It's just that it's more of a question of the munitions.
Well, there's the argument. Good Lord, Lila. Sorry, guys. Whoever's watching on video, she's disrupting this whole thing. There's a whole argument on that too, because I had this discussion with him on like school shooters and stuff like that. And, I was like, so what do you think about school shootings here in America? And he's like, well, back in my country, like you guys make it seem like, or it makes it seem like it happens every day, everywhere. He's like, but living here, it doesn't. He's like, it's really rare if it happens. He goes, we have acts of terrorism in our country. He's like, but it's just and he even said it himself. He goes, it's more, my country's so homogenized, we're all the same.
Yeah.
So there's no differences. Therefore, there's no acts of terror happening like that.
Yeah.
And it's not that the more races you get in, the more acts of terror. It's just the difference of ideas that come in. The United States is the only country like it is in the whole entire world, like to the level that it's at.
Yeah.
And he talked about the more homogenized a society is, the less violent a society is.
Well, yeah,
that's interesting to think about.
Well, it all comes down to like basic like psychological warfare. Like if there's an us versus them, then obviously there's something to fight against. But if you, like I said, don't have an othering of people, then like what are you really fighting against? So homogeny brings people together, and it's also why. And then for better or for worse, and a lot of times it's actually been bad, is that when homogeny is created organically in a country, it's great. But a lot of the times when the country tries to force homogeny is when you'll also see it break. You can look at what happened to Native Americans getting, like how they put them in, like got rid of their native names, put them in schools and try to make them, to like fit the bill better of like what they wanted them to be versus letting them organically be it, right?
Yeah. There's good argument on that too, but I agree, like you can't force an arm on somebody. You can't twist their arm and say twist their arm or you give them an Indian rug burn.
Yeah.
But you can't force their arm and say you have to go to school.
Yeah.
Like my personal opinion on public education, I don't like it. I do not like public education. You look at the scores of children today, it is drastically lower. The only reason why they can keep scores up higher, and the only reason why I know this stuff is because my buddy, a friend of mine, was the president of a school, or on the school board, and I learned a lot of this stuff. The reason why the scores are so high is because they're not testing as at a level that they used to. Yeah, it's completely changed, and I disagree with that. I think it should be harder, which is why I agree more with private schools and the charter schools. I agree more with those, and also kids tend to do better with the one-on-one care that they get from homeschooling. And those kids, statistically speaking, we're going to be getting a higher SAT score and have a higher chance of going to college and graduating from college. But I think it comes down to there's too many kids in class for a teacher to focus on.
There's not enough resources.
That's exactly what
there's not enough resources for our the public schools. And I think for me, I think education is why we have a lot of, or lack thereof, is why we have a lot of problems that we do have that are getting exacerbated over time in our country. It's this lack of education and lack of resources. We're not investing enough in our infrastructure to help create better citizens, more or less. And don't get me wrong, there is a part that's going to be personal. Like, you personally have to try, you personally have to do this. Yeah. But if you don't have it makes it much harder if the environment isn't conducive to learning, or there's not the resources that would really help the kids to learn. If they don't have that, then they're going to be less likely to do so. Yeah. Right. And, because when you think about that's the thing, especially in Indiana, we have a lot of problems with how much don't get me wrong. Like, there's some, having gone through public school, I was raised K through 12 public school, right?
So was I.
So there were definitely teachers were like, this teacher's just an asshole and shouldn't have their job, but tenure keeps them there, right? But there was also, on the other hand, there was teachers who were like, if they give this teacher more resources, all the good that they could do with it. Like, the reason why I got so enamored with the French language and French studies and international things was because my French teacher was amazing. Like, Mr. Price, I said, if he ever listened to this, thank you so much. You had such a big impact on my life because you were such a good teacher. You made it so much fun, and I learned so much from him, right? And we're talking about, this is Morristown, Indiana, right? We're everybody is very homogenous. To talk about homogeneity is that, everybody kind of believes the same things, and there's not anything wrong with that. But when it came to try to being, influenced, or not even influenced, but to be, to learn things about other cultures and other places, other languages, there's not really much access to it. Or even just be just other ways of thought, just to be, to experience those. There's not. We're all kind of conservative white farmer types, and once again, nothing wrong with that completely. But having been in his class and learning that there was kind of more out there, and I could actually access it. I didn't have to just live and die in the same hole in Morristown. Changed my whole perspective on everything. I was just oh, I kind of would maybe I'm not going to believe so much what these people believe, but I at least want to talk to them about it and let's see how they feel and what they why, that was cool. And he brought that in, and they made it real into my world. And so teachers can do that. Teachers can inspire you as much as your parents can. And so to think that, there's maybe these teachers out there that can do that. And don't get me wrong, I bet if they are truly can spot they're inspirational teachers, they're doing probably a lot with the little things that they'd have. But just imagine how much good they could do if they had more resources.
And to think about that, if they had more resources, what are some of the ways that they can get more? Well, one of those ways, and you can look at this, I looked at this locally at my own school that I grew up in Greenwood. Yeah. And I was I wonder what the salaries are. Because someone's teacher salaries are insanely small. And I'm oh, let's see how small they are. I went and looked, and I saw 6-figure salaries for teachers that I had. Yeah. Then I saw for the newer teachers, 33 to 35,000. When I looked at this, it was also 5 years ago. Yeah. So adjust for whatever the inflation is. Yeah. But it was $35,000 for a teacher. The same teacher doing the same exact thing is getting paid 6 figures, and that was because of tenure. Yep. So tenure really steals a lot of money away from the new teachers coming in for the first however many years it takes to build up. Is it 10 years to build into tenure?
10 or 12 years.
Yeah, something like that. They build in for tenure. And I've had a discussion with the teacher before. They said if tenure wasn't a thing, or at least they decreased it a little bit, you can take that same money and bring it in towards salaries for newer teachers to come in, and it can even build off from that. And then everyone's making more money doing the same exact thing. That's where I disagree with public education. You should have longevity. I do agree with longevity, but with that is performance grading. If your grading is going down, and don't make teaching easy, make it hard, because they're there for a reason. They're there because they have a passion for it. Yeah. If I start performing worse and worse at my job, guess what'll happen? I'll get fired because people are going to die. Yeah. If a teacher's doing the same thing, in the long run, lives will be lost and families will be crushed because there's nothing there that they're providing these kids.
And just opportunities will be
let down and not even taken.
Yeah, I wouldn't be who I am today without some of the teachers that I had that made an impact on me, And I'm sure that's created I can't say which opportunities that's created, like, you know, in a more
You wouldn't have met Chloe if
Chloe
you didn't have Mr. Price.
Exactly. I said that's exactly correct. Like, because I would have never gone on that trip my junior year to France and been like, whoa, there's so much more out there. You know, like I would have never had that moment. So yeah.
Let's talk about today's dating world. I mean, obviously you've got a girlfriend, but you're not in it. But the thing that I've noticed a lot of is there are so many girls out there that are like the influencer types, the model types on Instagram and all of that. Like, I don't think it's fair. My personal opinion, I notice this a lot at the gym. I don't think it's fair for any girl from the ages of, let's say 18, because obviously that's where the ages are supposed to be in their gym, 18 to 25, 26, like saying, I'm a fitness model. Like, no, you're not. You're 18 to 25. Like, that's the range that you're supposed to look similar to that. Like, it's easy to look like that. Unless you went from a weight transition from being really overweight or extremely, underweight to a healthier weight, which if you did that, I applaud you on that. I find that impressive. But if you've always been around the same average, but you're just taking better angled pictures, I don't like, how does that make you feel? Because it kind of really irks me when I see that.
I think that it's something that I don't think about too much in a way.
Yeah, because you got a girlfriend.
Well, no, not even in that way too, but of course in that way, Chloe, if you're listening. But no, it's like one of those things that like the people that know better know. Right. And like, those are the only people that I really care, like to like, to like work with or like, be seen with, is because like the people, there's a lot of, and like, don't get me wrong. Like if you're 18 and 25, you have a fitness account and, maybe you've always looked the same way you do, but if it's in some way keeping you more accountable,
if it's keeping you accountable,
and like I said, and it's something that you have a passion for, and maybe like this is just the beginning of your journey, great. Right. But present it as that, always be genuine, right? And the problem is, and this is why, like now people that I've like started to take my social media a little bit more seriously are starting to call me an influencer. I'm like, I don't really like that term because I feel like the way it's thrown around and the way a lot of people I see that are truly influencers and that's what they do in life. And like, this isn't everybody, but there is a certain percentage of them that's like, they don't really know what they're talking about, and then they're not really helping people because a lot of people are following what they're saying, but they're kind of being led astray by people that are more confident than they are accurate, or more more outspoken than they are truthful, because that's something that, whether it's the media, whether it's just, like I said, social media, whatever, any kind of like media in itself, is that people tend to listen to people that are more confident about what they're saying. It goes kind of like, and it goes back to like the Dunning-Kruger effect that we were talking about a little bit too, is like sometimes some of the people that are the most confident in what they're saying know the least about it. But if you're confident and you're like loud and outspoken about it, it draws attention because, there's no such thing as like bad press, right? In a way, like any way to get your name out there can, it helps you, I guess, in a way. You have to fight off, but that's what you want to be. If you want to be perceived like as the villain, but you're still like known, even though you are the villain, right? And some people would say that that's still going to generate revenue, because it's all about shock value in a way. You can just look at the way that the media has, advertisements. It's like if we talk about this,
blood
cells, yeah. Everybody loves dirty laundry, right?
Well, I mean, look at the recent cases. Someone just brought this up to me at work yesterday. So I don't follow
Hamlin,
sports.
like what happened with the Buffalo Bills player?
Collapsed and went into cardiac arrest. Did you hear about the football player that saved 3 kids? There's a football player that saved 3 kids. He was in like ICU. There was another retired football player that did something else spectacular, but no one knows anything about it.
Yeah, because it absorbed all the oxygen in the area.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong, that's not that
player's.
Tell you
what the guy's name was.
I think it's Damar Hamlin. I think it's something along those lines. I'm so sorry. Don't at me if I'm wrong.
I'm not sorry about it. I don't watch sports.
But it's like I said, it's not his fault that he had a cardiac arrest.
No, it's not.
Like it absorbed all the oxygen, but. Like the media knows that you're going to tune into that, right? Yes. And don't get me wrong, like, it's cool to cover that because, he's recovering, he's safe. We love that, like whatever, nothing bad about that at all. It's just that the media knows that they're going to make money off that, and it's not for a There's always a catch. There's always a reason. It's not 100% for some kind of philanthropic, reason that they're covering it so much. They're like, wow, people are really tuned into this story, and so they're gonna push it because that's what media is. In a way, you have to be like, well, I guess that's the same thing as like a business corporation that sells munitions. Like maybe those get used against people that that shouldn't, they're innocent, but that's their business. Like hands off kind of situation. But even though there's like people that are implicated, but that's just how it is, unfortunately.
There's even businesses that will hire. There's businesses. So a buddy of mine gave me this conspiracy theory that I think is kind of plausible. So take Gillette, the shaving company.
The best a man can get.
The best. I personally
not sponsored here.
Yeah,
though,
they're not sponsored. They will never be sponsored. Never. Because they did that whole toxic masculinity commercial. They're like, "Oh, boys will be boys." I'm like, I am a boy. Like, but yeah, I don't. Now Walther Firearms and Nutella. If Nutella wants to sponsor me, oh my god, I love Nutella.
Yep, and Nutella also reach out to my people. If I don't have people, but reach out to. Wait, if I get people, reach out to them, or just email me, paulcaldwell2121@gmail.com. Nutella, please hit me up.
I love Nutella. I put it on everything.
It's so good.
But there's a theory that like Gillette started these other smaller, crappier shaving companies to take away if the ones that they weren't grasping, because people who don't want to buy Gillette, they'll buy whatever other brand. They buy their brand and then they start a feud with each other, and now they're getting twice the revenue coming in from the people that hate them and the people that love them. Well, there's companies that do that all the time. There's businesses that do that all the time. There's politicians that sell their own hate merch because they'll make just as much money off of it. I'm like, that's such a great way to make extra money and to capitalize on that.
Yeah, for sure. And it just stems back. Whether you believe in what that company's saying or not, if you think they're the villain or the hero because of it, they're profiting off of you in either way.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, I hate this company, and you're like talking about it on social media and just like kind of like echoing something and talking about them, the more you talk about the best way to really, like I said, first, obviously don't buy their products if you don't believe in the company. Second off, just don't talk about them. Like, that's the thing, is like when people are like, oh, did you hear this thing about this celebrity or whatever? And I don't like them. I'm like, nope. I just kind of leave it at that. I'm like, I'm not going to rant about it on social media, because what you're doing is you're giving them more attention, which is exactly what they want.
Like what I just did with Gillette.
Yeah. We'll have to cut that part out.
We'll have to cut that part out. I'll bleep that word.
Yeah. You'll just have to refer to it as like the company that will not be named, very like Voldemort-esque. But anyway, I guess we went on a tangent, but we were talking about
dating.
Like I said, fitness influencers. Yeah. So it's like, it's like the opinions that I said that I value. We'll see people that are like, not doing it for the right reasons, or like are kind of like, presenting themselves as something that they're not, being ingenuine. I don't know, ingenuine or ungenuine. Ingenuine, I'm gonna go with.
Let's create a word.
Yeah. So yeah. And they'll see that for what it is, and like that's fine. So it's the people that are like, oh my gosh, can you believe, like, do you follow this person? I'm like, no, I'm like, yeah, because they're not like really about it or whatever. And like to some degree, like, don't get me wrong, maybe I am a phony to some people, and that's fine. Like I enjoy what I do and what I put out there, and I feel,
But it's the intention behind what you're posting. It's not like, look at me, you can accomplish this if you do these things.
Yeah, you're never gonna get my sculpting cream, right? Yeah. To lose belly fat, because I don't believe that shit works. There could be an argument like maybe it like heats up your core, and the heat brings more blood to the area, which but like if we're talking about, like, I'm gonna tell you is like, okay, maybe that does do something a little bit, but let's knock off the things that are most most important in the first place. Are you sleeping enough? Are you eating are your macros on point? Is your diet right? And then third, like, are you working out? Are you active? Then we can talk about the sculpting cream and whether or not that's like, but those like three things aren't being taken care of first. It's a good
foundation to have.
Yeah, those are. Because people need to understand that supplements are called supplements for a reason, because they supplement. They are not the whole thing. They are far from it. You can like supplement them in, and they might have an added effect to whatever you're trying to doing. But if you're not laying the foundation, like the important thing is like sleeping correctly, diet, like I say, I don't even want to say diet, but proper nutrition, because diet is something that people are like, I'm going to go on a diet for 2 weeks and that's going to solve everything. No, have a lifestyle nutritional like aspect towards it, and you'll be, like I said, you'll have way more success with it. But like, do those things, and then you can worry about the supplements, and like they will, like I said, the efficacy depends on the supplement. Creatine and caffeine are the most, like I said, the two big ones I tell everybody, like most studied, most shown to, like I said, have a positive effect on whatever you're trying to do, like I said, as far as like fitness and like, an active lifestyle in the gym. Everything else is kind of like A to F rating. I mean, like B to F rating, because A is caffeine and creatine, right? And everything else after that, like it's up in the air. There'll be conflicting research on both sides for a lot of that stuff. And then a lot of the good research on the most bullcrap stuff comes from the actual company that's putting it out there. So
that's right. Check
your methodologies, guys.
Well, even looking at like studies, because I was talking with one of my physical therapists about it, and I don't think she listens to these anyway. I don't think she's even interested in anything that I have to say, which is okay. But
maybe she'll tune in now.
I don't think she will. But we talked about like studies with like cold water immersion, and like the studies that I've read show that it's got a lot of positive effects.
This is a very hot topic right now.
It's a very hot topic, and I've been, obviously, like I said earlier, I've been doing it for over a year now, and a year and 2 months, and I've noticed so many differences in my life. One biggest aspect of it is if I'm doing cold water immersion from 1 to 3 minutes, that's just for my mood. That's just straight up depression, anxiety. Am I diagnosed with those? No. Do I get depressed sometimes? Do I get anxious sometimes? Yeah. So I just hop in the water and I feel better afterwards. Yeah. But when I had that discussion with her and was talking about some of the scientific more stuff with it, she's like, well, what are your resources? Are they accredited sources? And I'm like, accredited by who? And she's like, and she's naming all these colleges. And I'm like, yeah, like you can't just go off of just what colleges say about it or the collegiate studies that are being done on it, because those professors have certain donors. They have certain donors that pay towards their college funds. Now let's go ahead and their college funds, their salaries or their college for their whatever their program is. Let's go ahead and say that you can do cold water immersion. You just go out to the creek behind your yard and just dip into it. And that's going to help with inflammation in the body. It's going to help with increasing dopamine levels and other levels in the body right now. But if you take this medication that I have that decreases inflammation, it's going to cost, I'm going to make hundreds of millions of dollars off of it. I want you to push for that. It's so much easier to do that.
Well, Purdue just got popped for this stuff a couple of years ago.
Did they really?
Well, there was a big lawsuit with, like I said, because Big Pharma is a very large issue.
Huge.
It's a very large issue.
It's a huge issue.
And, even if like from whatever aisle of the conversation you're coming from politically, like it's something to definitely pay attention to, because they got in trouble like for helping push, I want to say like I said, opiates. So like I said, painkillers, like I said, paying off. I don't know exactly how the money was funneled, but like money was getting to doctors to like, they're not like, because it's always, it's always going to be hard. Like the paper trail is going to be hard to follow, but more or less the way I understand it, and I might be wrong, and feel free to correct me, anybody. Like I said, remember, ignorance is, we're all ignorant to a certain degree, so let's just try to learn. But the way I understand it is that the pharmaceutical companies were helping funnel money towards doctors so that they would more easily prescribe opiates.
Yes.
For pain, like I said, painkillers. And it was always like, like obviously they would have like a reason to have them, but over like prescribing, like, like being a little bit too like, trigger happy with giving it out, because the more prescriptions they make, the more, like I said, the more
money that the doctors get, and then they can pay for their vacations on it. That's something that's become more widely known, that a lot of doctors will push for certain medications. And I had a doctor, thank God he retired, but he was pushing for nerve blocking agents for me. And I said, I will not take them. He goes, well, this is the only way that it'll help you. I'm like, this can't be the only way.
Yeah.
And he would not let me change. I had to go to another doctor to get a second opinion.
Yep.
And then
you should always do.
Always
go get a second opinion on. I mean, obviously, like, you got a broken finger or something, like it's
you don't need a second opinion on a broken finger.
But like more things like getting nerve blockers or something, feel free. Like
any type of medication, always get a second opinion. And always look up your own side effects of what it is, because the doctor's not going to tell you what it is. is most of the time. But that doctor told me, he goes, oh, that's probably because he gets kickback. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Kickback. Yep.
He gets a kickback from the pharmaceutical company. And a friend of mine that I knew for a while was a pharmaceutical rep, and she sold a lot of drugs to people, and she's gorgeous, and they've got to be. And she goes, oh yeah, these doctors will get kickbacks, and they get vacations like to Cancun or Aruba or Jamaica.
Yeah.
These companies send them out there. But so like, think about this. So we were just talking about with Purdue. Think about this too. One of the largest healthcare fraudulent settlement was $2.3 billion that this company had to pay out back in around 2009. And it was for fraudulent marketing. It was the company Pfizer had to pay that out. Now, obviously, we know about Pfizer with recent activities with what they just did. But if they did that just recently in 2009 and they had to pay that out as the largest, you have to look at the history of something. That's all I'll say on it.
Yeah.
But that's what I like to look at on things.
Yeah.
And that was fraudulent marketing that went on for years.
Oh yeah. And then like I said, it's all, I mean, like they said, all the big companies do it. It's kind of like the same way I see big, like politics, like politicians is like, if I feel like I ask myself, like, to get to a certain, like level in a hierarchy in a cutthroat environment, like how much of your soul do you have to sell to get to that point? Or like whether you're looking at a corporation or like a politician, it's kind of like, it's two sides of the same coin to me. Is like, I very, like, unless it's like something very altruistic or, philanthropic in itself, I tend to doubt the bigger things, the bigger companies or the bigger politicians, because I'm like, how'd you get there? And like, what's the history behind it?
Look at their net worth before and after they were president.
Yeah.
Which is, I will say this, whether you like him or not, Donald Trump lost over $1 billion.
Yeah.
Going in from president, like at $4.5 billion to coming out at, he lost maybe $2 billion. I'll have to look it up again, but he lost money going into presidency. Every other most recent president has gained in their net worth after becoming president with a $400,000 salary.
Yeah.
That's what blows my mind. A lot of politicians, I can't stand that. I think we could do another podcast on policies and politics, because that's a discussion to be had for a long time. We would probably agree on a lot of things.
Well, that's the thing, is like what we've talked about off camera is like, we don't come from like the same side of the aisle, but we're not into like to party politics. Yeah. Because it's I don't even like, I'm more right leaning, but I don't even like Republicans. Yeah.
And I admitted that to you earlier.
Yeah.
I don't like Democrats because I like their people, but like, I don't like their policies.
Yeah.
But I also, same thing with Republicans. I lean more, I'm a constitutionalist more or less, and conservative. I think that people should be left alone, but constitutionally left alone. That's why I lean towards that. But also, not having a criminal who, was raping a bunch of people being put in prison for the rest of his life. I think a $1.89 bullet will fix that problem, because the guy's never going to do it again.
Yeah.
That's that's just my opinion on stuff. Whether, it's right or wrong on that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
somebody to commit a crime like that, especially against children, that's buried underneath railroad tracks. But some people were like, oh, he should be reformed and this and that. I'm like, if that was your child,
yeah,
would you want him to be reformed? Or
that's the thing, and
that's a really tough position to be put in too.
I was talking to one of my buddies who is, just putting it like he's, because like I said, I would be considered a progressive. Like I don't really, like I said, that's just because of like the way I live my life. I guess it has nothing really to do about how I see other people that are quote unquote conservative, because I have many friends that are conservative. You happen to be one.
Thank you.
Because it's not about like. It's not so much always about what you believe, is how you implement it in your life.
Yeah.
Right. Like your beliefs are important to a certain degree, but like I said, if you're an asshole even if you're right, you're still an asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and it's always been, because my buddy, like he's a huge Ron DeSantis?
Ron DeSantis, yeah.
Huge Ron DeSantis fan. And don't get me wrong, like I don't think that some of the arguments that are being made are wrong from Ron DeSantis, but I don't always believe in like where he's coming from or like how he says things, his approach. But like my buddy will talk to me about it, and I'm like, yeah, and I'll be there to listen to him because he's my buddy, right?
Yeah.
And if there's ever anything that we'll check each other when we feel like, like I feel like that's a little bit too much for me to go along with, or I feel like that's a little bit extreme. But it's always out of respect, because every topic or every conversation, like if you sit down with somebody and talk to them, you should like you have like there's some kind of level of, like you said, mutual respect that you have to listen and hear them out and be like, okay, I see what you're saying. You know, you've opened this conversation. I disagree respectfully, and this is why. And like, you know, and this is how I see it. And then like, but I see what you mean when you're talking about that. Because, and this is the thing is like, I think, you know, in a lot of ways, the media is, like I said, is all about sensationalism, correct? And so pitting people with conservative values versus people with progressive values, even though there's so much more nuance than that. Because like I said, if you're like this kind of conservative, doesn't mean you're like that kind of conservative. And like you're that type of progressive doesn't mean you're that kind of progressive. But they profit off pitting us against each other because it creates more sensationalism. Like, can you believe what this person said? And like, it's take completely out of context, had nothing to do with what they're actually talking about. It's just to sensationalize. So more people, you know, like I think, you know, like whether it's MSNBC, whether it's CNN, whether it's Fox News, all of them are profiting on like sensationalizing the like, you know, things from the people they, like I said, to their base about people that they know that their base doesn't agree with.
Correct.
Right. If I know like they know that they're going to make money off ad revenue for people, like more people that tune in because like, you know, like because this wacky politician, I'm not even going to like say names. I'm not going to say like an actual media outlet because it doesn't matter. It's like, they're like this wacky politician from this side said this thing. And they're like, I can't believe that. I've got to watch and see what they said, you know, like and be outraged about it. And they profit off of that.
It makes it tough to watch. I don't watch major media. I cannot watch it because for one, I don't support that.
Yeah.
I support small private media, which means somebody who's doing this from their house and they're reading articles and they've read multiple articles. They'll give their sources and then they talk about their opinion. Or there's some people that are I don't believe there's no such thing as unbiased sources. I don't believe that.
It's always going to fall one way or the other.
It's going to fall
some are closer,
somewhere.
Some are closer. But some are really bad.
Correct. Yeah. Some are really like to the far left and far right. But I like to see people's personal, private media accounts because, for one, other people will hold them accountable. And when you hold someone accountable with a private media, you can hold them accountable by, we're going to unsubscribe and you're going to make less money. Yeah. So that's their motivation to do the right thing. It's their motivation to give good news, great content, which is why obviously here I'm not like super popular because I don't give out I'm not doing great content there's something I'm missing on it. So I'm still got to figure that out.
Oh, we're doing great right now.
We're doing fantastic. This is fantastic. This is great content. This is like 2 hours. We're 2 hours in on
Some
it.
Self-flagellation.
Yeah.
Throw that in there.
But like, but you always have to catch the eye. You always have to give out what their impression of what they would probably agree with you is.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't enjoy watching major media, and it's almost it's every single major media now. If you want, now what I've learned from friends that live outside of the country, if you want to watch what's truly going on in America, watch like Sky News or watch the news from other countries talking about it because they'll actually talk about what's going on.
That's something that we can, like I said, I remember like being like watching like French news, how much more like direct and to the point and the questions are, and like, you know, like there's not all that pomp and circumstance, and that, you know, like they're like, this is journalism.
It's not a dog and pony show.
No, and that's very much what it is for us. Yeah. And or like one of the things that, like, you know, there's a lot of
politics in news. There's too much politics in news.
Yeah, because there's so much spin cycle, to where like there's at least some integrity, and this is like the way that, you know, like I'm all about like, you know, the free market and everything, and the, you know, like obviously every free market has to have its regulations and everything, and I'm not against like that or whatever, but like it's almost to a point where you're like, this has gotten away from journalism, you know, like, you know, there should be a free media, like freedom of speech, like that's the utmost importance.
Do you think, to interrupt you?
Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
But to interrupt respectfully is, do you think with journalism that the time of quotas, like reaching quotas, like not setting who's going to be the best journalist, but just you have to meet a certain quota of a certain type of a journalist, and also not having the people that are more aggressive and say, we're not doing that, this is what we're doing. Yeah. Do you think that falls into the issue bin of why journalism is the way it is today?
I mean,
or at least has something to do with it?
See, I think the way that like why journalism is the way it is today is that the people that are funding it have motives. Like like there's.
I could see that being a part of it. I can see that being a part.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. It's not the whole thing, but I think a large problem is that when you're like I said, your motives towards releasing like this piece are. You're motivated by like so it's like the money you're like what you're getting your money from. Same way that we were talking about with like studies and stuff.
Yeah.
If it's not like truly altruistic, no, there's no such thing as 100% altruistic. There's always some kind of, there's always something in it for somebody, right? Whether that's something that we would see as good or bad is, kind of based on perspective and like, your beliefs or morals or whatever. But the way I see it is that, like there's a lot of money funneled in of like people that they want a certain type of, what's the word I'm looking for? Narrative. Mm-hmm. They have a narrative in mind and, they like, do this research, but come to this conclusion. Right. Or like do this journalism, do this story, but come to this conclusion. Like they're like railroading things. Right.
Or if you find something to be different than what their intentions were, they'll just snuff it out.
They'll scrap it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%. And then that's like where I'm like, it's almost like there needs to be some kind of regulation to like let media actually evolve and like and like be untouched, right?
Do you think it's regulation that should stop it, or do you think just more freedom in it?
Well, that's the thing is like it depends on what you're considering freedom to like get money from whoever they want to, because that might create conflict of interest.
Like I don't agree with lobbying as much. There needs to be there needs to be some degree of lobbying, as bad as it sounds.
But there needs to be a cap.
There needs to be a cap on it. There needs to be there are laws, and I don't think there's caps on it.
No, I think it was like the Patriot Act that changed. No, what was
Patriot Act? Something different.
No, Patriot Act's the one after. Yeah, it's not the wrong one. But there's Citizens United. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
I think it's Citizens United.
Sounds like it.
It was the lobbying one.
We can go with that.
Yeah,
we can go with Citizens
Fact
United.
check that, because
somebody else do that.
I was like, I knew it was like I knew like the two hot topic ones usually revolve around Patriot Act and then Citizens United.
The Patriot Act was with the dude with the glasses. He was he fled to Russia. Edward Snowden.
Okay.
Snowden is the one that was working for
one of the secret
organizations, that part of the government, and found information that the U.S. government was using the Patriot Act to spy on people.
Right.
And
correct.
One thing that I agree with so it was during the Bush administration, with I believe William Barr, I think, was the Attorney General at the time, and then I could be wrong on that, and then the next president was, and I will credit him on this, did an investigation on it and found out there was only, he had a team do an investigation on it, and only found that it only had stopped one person who was making phone calls, and he was doing some type of low level, they called it terrorism, but very low level stuff, like worth only a couple $1,000s. Yeah. So the idea was to catch terrorists by spying on every single person's phone in America, and it caught nobody. Is zero. It didn't stop a single thing. Yeah. They couldn't prove that it did. So that in itself is a huge breach of your privacy, but they sat and lied to you about it, which that's just what politicians do regardless. Yeah. So that when he came out with that, because I remember like guys that
because he was a whistleblower.
He was a whistleblower. Yeah. And guys were like, he needs to be put in jail, court martial, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, what's this even about? Once I researched what it was about and listened to him talk about it, I'm like, I agree with this dude. Like, they shouldn't do that. Yeah. And then someone's like, well, it's for the greater good. I'm like, no, it's not for the greater good.
It's Big Brother stuff.
Yeah, it's what point are you hurting and harming others? Do you want to know too much? Because if I know too much information about certain things, does it hurt me or help me? Yeah. It'll hurt me. Yeah. So it's not better just to keep it quiet. But like, if you're the government, you can't spy on your people. Yeah. And they're doing it right now, obviously. Like, I got a story.
Hi, FBI.
You want to hear it?
Yeah.
This is okay. I don't know if this is just my subjective thought.
Okay. Hit me with it.
I did a podcast with a guy named Bob Wagner.
Okay.
I don't even know if I should say it. I could say his name.
You can
but
always bleep it out and post.
Yeah,
if
I
you
could
need
say
to.
his name, but I can't say what we talked about.
Yeah.
We spoke about a certain individual who was being investigated by the U.S. government, and you could not say that individual's name on YouTube.
Really?
So he was going through a process for an interview for the Pentagon. And he said, hey, there is certain things that we can't talk about while around certain devices. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. We just won't talk about it. Well, we're sitting there talking about this, and he brings up this person, and he says the guy's name as we're recording and everything, and the power to my house goes out. Okay.
Yeah.
The power to my house goes out. I'm like, well, that's weird. I get up. I'm looking around. I'm waiting for things to turn back on because typically it's a power surge and it kicks right back on.
Yeah.
I look outside. Next door neighbor's got power. I look across the street. My neighbor's got power.
Yeah.
Only my house. I'm like,
makes the mind wonder, you know?
So I come back in. The power kicks back on. And he's like, that was weird. I'm like, were you serious about like not saying certain things? He's like, well, I did bring up such and such and this, and that person's being investigated. And I'm like, do you think? He goes, I'm not going to say anything. And then we sat, and then we're like, well, we'll just have to redo the whole episode. So we scheduled another one and redid the entire thing. And we did not bring that up, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
Now, was the government listening to my house or to his phone? I think they're listening to his phone, but like, it's weird. It's weird that happened. I've never had that happen. Never had it happen since. I even went out and bought a battery backup for all my stuff for it to be connected to. And it was just weird. So I think, yes, it still goes on.
Yeah. I was like, is it coincidental or did it happen for a reason?
There's
a lot of things in life like that where you're like, man, it might make a believer out of me in that, you know, like it
was weird.
It boggles the mind. Yeah. That is odd.
It was really odd.
But it is funny that, like, back to the Edward Snowden part, is that, you know, like, even though we would consider ourselves of like different like political leanings, is like that's where we completely agree. It's just like I have a lot of friends that would probably consider themselves more aligned with like you know, more like they might be progressive, they might be Democrats, but don't like Edward Snowden, right? Because they say what he did was wrong, you know, because it was for the greater good that they were doing this or whatever. I'm like, I completely disagree. I think that's a complete as like disregard for your freedom as an American, you know, or like anybody. Like, it's not right, you know, like you have certain rights to privacy, right? And then they were definitely taking it and running away with it. And so, and then, like I said, Edward Snowden was the whistleblower that told everybody about it, and then he had to like leave the U.S. probably fear of what might happen to him.
They were gonna
persecution,
take him to court for it, and put him in jail for the rest of his life. Yeah,
to where I'm like, I'm glad he said that, you know, because like I don't want to be spied upon. I know it's still going to happen to some degree. It's like being like, because this is the thing is like we can argue about like if you believe in big or small government or whatever, but we live in one with with big government, more or less. That's where we are. Whether you want to change that or not, that's up to you. I think that it would be good to change the way that it works for sure. Downsizing probably wouldn't be a bad thing in certain ways. Yeah, exactly. So once again,
great thing.
We're not, like I said, we're like I said, different political leanings, but we agree. But we've had big government since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, you know, since the 1930s. And so when people are like, you know, like we want, you know, like we like they advocated for like we had small government anytime between then and there. No, it's like it has been full blown ever since then. And so, yeah, I don't want the government spying on me to like where they can just tap into everything. Like if they can get a warrant to because I've done something.
That has to go through the court system. Yeah.
Then and the judge has the probable cause and everything. Then by all means, I guess I messed up somehow because I believe in our judicial system, right? To a certain, you know, like obviously like anything, probably think some things could make it work better, in my opinion, but I would like to overall believe that if somebody has a warrant for me, then I probably messed up on some kind of thing, you know?
Well, that's taking responsibility for your actions, man. Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, 100%, because I want to be, like I said, a good citizen, even if I do mess up and somebody has some reason to come after me, you know, and like, then that's the process, right? Then as much as I would think that I would want somebody that's like a criminal to have a due process pushed against them. If I'm a criminal, then yeah, me too. Like I'm not exempt from that, right? I just lead my life in a way that I don't think I'll ever fall into that kind of pitfall.
So I'll ask this question, then we'll finish up because we're almost at 3 hours.
Oh wow.
Well, I'll have to cut out like 15 minutes because of the break we took, or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But it is the beginning of the year. It is January 10th.
Oh man.
What is your opinion on the New Year's resolution people coming into the gym?
Okay. Leaving the spicy content for the end. I am 100% for people coming to the gym, bettering yourself. Because if that's what you said, like I'm going to start something like a good habit, and so I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to try to get in shape. I'm going to try to lose weight, or whatever your goal is in the gym. I'm 100% for it, right? And us as people that are been going to the gym for years, I'm coming up on a decade now, so starting to feel that too. But if these people come to you and ask questions, and if you are one of these like a gym like a resolutioner that's coming in, ask questions. Like most people at the gym will be more than happy to help you if you come with a sincere question, like should I do this? Should I do that? Like obviously, like don't interrupt them in the middle of a set. Like we can talk about
gym etiquette.
Gym etiquette.
I do want to talk, like at some point, I want to have another episode where we talk about gym etiquette.
Oh, we can definitely do that. The 10 Commandments get together for that one. But for sure, like be inquisitive, ask questions, just not mid-set, whatever. Like or see somebody like that looks like they know what they're doing. Like and be like, hey, I'm new here, but I'm trying to learn. I am sure that most, if not all, like gym goers that consider them veterans of going to the gym will be more than happy to help you, because it's more of like the lack of the desire to learn gym etiquette, or like how like to do things more appropriately, whatever appropriately is to you, I guess. But most gym veterans have the same ideas. Be inquisitive, that's great. But the thing is like I hate having to fight off all the people, because when you have to when you kind of especially if you go to a smaller gym, like a hole in the wall gym, we go to
it's a pretty big commercial gym,
pretty big gym. But even at a big gym, if you go around the same time for a long enough time, you get to know the people that are there, and it's really cool. The gym's honestly a cool place to meet people from all different walks of life, from all different experiences. But like I said, you get to know these people. Might not know them by name, but you know them by look, and give them the nod, whatever. There's some mutual respect because you see yourselves, day in, day out, putting in the work. But then, like I said, new people come in, and like I said, they obviously take equipment. They don't take equipment; they're paying for a membership, whatever. They are using equipment that's usually more available for the regulars. And so as a result, you have to, like I said, it takes more time to get something done. And it's just it's overpopulated. And it's a lot of times they're doing things you're like, why are they doing that on that? And if also this is for everybody, but this is especially for people, like I said, if you're a resolutioner, this will help you to make friends quicker at the gym. Get off your phone. If you're on, like I said, on something, especially if it is a high commodity kind of a piece of equipment, get off your phone, change your music, whatever, cool. Don't take phone calls, preferably not unless it's super important, but then just free up the machine you're using, right? Don't just to stay on it. Stay off your phone, be about what you're about, know your rest sets, like I said, and then and even the coolest thing that you can do, and this goes for all gym people, is to go up to a person if they look like they're eyeing your machine, be like we're trying to use this, and if they're like, yeah, just okay, tell them how many sets you got left. Reach out to them, and then because the first thing you start to do when you're hyped up on pre-workout and maybe you got to go to work and so you only have so much time, is you start not liking that person if they're on your machine, or be like, hey, do you want to work in? Kill them with kindness. Kill people with kindness in the gym.
It's a brotherhood there at the gym.
I said it very much is. It is a community, and so if you give a little bit, you'll get a little bit back and maybe more. And they'll be more welcome to help you. And that's the people, like I said, if they've been doing it for a while, glean that information from them, like absorb things like a sponge. I still, like I said, I'm over 10 years into like doing something in the gym. I've changed my goals many times, but I'm over 10 years in, and like I still like learn something new more or less every time I set foot in the gym, because I'm open to it. And even if I'm like, okay, that doesn't really align itself with my goals, I'm still like, but I got it in my back pocket now, and maybe I'll come across somebody that could use that information. Or like, oh, you showed me this lift, or this way to do it, this way to like focus on it, or how to, like how to move. You never, it's like the gym's just life in a nutshell. It's just like, you never should stop learning, no matter how much you know. Just keep, like I said, just keep being a sponge, keep absorbing everything. And I think if you're a resolutioner, that'll help you out a lot, because a lot of the veterans are going to be like, kind of like I said, like grumpy that you're there. But in the end, if you stick with it and you stay around, then you have, like I said, you're more than welcome to, like I said, you will be welcomed into the community with open arms. Just
beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said, man. We're right around, we're getting close to the 3-hour mark, dude. I really appreciate you taking this many hours out of your day just to sit and come and talk with me.
Well, so I appreciate you having me here, and like I said, and having me to talk. And like I said, it's been a first time experience for me, and I've had a great time.
I'm glad I popped you, Jerry. All right. All right, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. So great to be here.
And there you have it, folks. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, talking with Paul, and learned as much as I did, and if not even more. And I hope to have him on again to dive even deeper in a lot of the subjects that we talked about, and even talk about some extra stuff too for the second episode. So I really hope that you have a wonderful day. If you did like what you saw and you want to see more of it, go ahead, again, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, just go ahead and subscribe to the channel there. If you can on YouTube, hit that like, and then leave a comment down at the bottom what you really enjoyed about this episode. It helps me out and lets me know what you enjoy, so I can try to keep giving you what you want. Have a fantastic day.